We all can agree that the first 3 worlds in Plants vs Zombies 2 are an absolute masterpiece. Yet, what about their plans? A few months ago I decided to try out the basic plans to see how far I could beat Plants vs Zombies 2 with the plans from each of the 3 classical worlds. This video is a compilation of all 3 movies that I previously posted, and I hope you enjoy watching them. Without further ado, let's begin the epic challenge. Plants vs Zombies 2 was beaten with pretty much everything, but what about the basic plans? We usually obtain them so fast that everybody forgets them right after entering a new world. Yet, not in today's video, because I'm going to try to beat Plants vs Zombies 2 using only plants from ancient Egypt. Today I've got 3 hearts which are equal to 3 levels, and each time I face an unbeatable level, I lose a heart. If I lose more than 3 levels, the challenge is over. What about the rest of the rules? First, I can only use plants from ancient Egypt and the tutorial world. Second, no leveling up. And third, no power-ups. Fourth, using pre-planted plants is okay. And fifth, we're skipping the levels that force us to use other plants. So everything is set up and we are ready to do it. Our time adventure began with a delicious taco eaten by Crazy Dave, so that's why I'm forced to travel to ancient Egypt. We're not going to spend much time here, since I was gathering the plans for the campaign and preparing myself for a real challenge which will only begin in the Pirate Seas. However, before we move on to the next world, I decided to tell you more about the challenge while speedrunning the game. So I decided to include plants from a tutorial world in this challenge, as they have essential mechanics for beating Plants vs Zombies 2 that plants from the ancient Egypt cannot substitute. There is no alternative to potato mine or walnut, which is why these plants are included in this challenge. In addition, they are closely connected to the local wipe, so excluding them would be a big mistake. So day 24 is finally completed and all the plants are gathered, which means that the real challenge is starting now. Even though the Pirate Seas is the first world of the challenge, it didn't feel like I'm going to struggle here. Despite missing some tiles or even lanes, my strategy for beating the levels didn't change much, since I needed only the first 5 tiles to place the defense. In addition, Johnny the Walnut became an essential member of the crew who stopped the seagulls with its tasty shell. On day 2 the number of zombies was already higher than in most levels of ancient Egypt, but it didn't change anything. Day 3 was a copy of the first one, so don't pay attention to it. However, day 4 had already introduced the bucket heads, whose heads were smashed with a punch from a bunk chai. I don't know why, but day 6 was a full copy of the 5th one. And on day 7, interesting things have finally started to happen, as we met the barrel roller zombie. It is the first serious enemy we've faced in this challenge, but fortunately we got a bloomerang for this case. Day 9 was beaten exclusively with the pea shooter and Johnny, and on day 10 I didn't get enough time to put all the plants I wanted to. That's unfair. Day 11 of the Pirate Seas was already preparing us for the future fights, as the number of zombies we faced was immense. Even though we managed to survive the final wave, which included swashbucklers, imp cannons and barrels, the problem was obvious. My defense strategy was not prepared for a massive zombie spam, so I had to change it so as not to fail in the future. On day 13, a greedy pirate attempted to steal my repeater, but fortunately luck was on my side. I can't say that the pirate is a serious enemy, but it may become annoying when my defense is low and the sunflowers are not protected. Finally, the last 10th level. For an insane 3000 suns that were given to me, I prepared a simple but effective defense line, which consisted of 2 lanes of repeaters and a lane of bloomerangs, and of course a lane of walnuts. Unfortunately, 2 of 5 nuts have disappeared because of Popka the Parrot, so the final wave was beaten without them. The only thing I would change in this strategy is to switch a lane of repeaters into bloomerangs, as they are more effective against the giant hordes. Day 15 was remembered by me because of the 3-peater. It's not every day that I get a free plant on the loan, and my new body was highly effective in defeating the cannons. Day 16 was probably one of the easiest levels of the Pirate Seas, mainly because of the sprint beans. You can literally beat the entire level only by feeding the green body with a plant food, so he drops everyone into the water, including barrels and swashbucklers. Day 17 is one of those days when you have to complete the challenge to beat the level. This time the requirement was to defeat 20 zombies in 30 seconds, which is okay considering how many plants I'm able to plant on the ship. At this point, combining a repeater with a bloomerang is the most efficient strategy for defeating the zombies, so nothing stops me from using it for as long as possible. The next day is my favorite level of the Pirate Seas, and 4 out of 6 plants are allowed to be used in this challenge, so we don't miss an opportunity to play the level. It began with a good boost of 425 suns, which allowed me to place pea shooters with repeaters. By the first wave, I had already planted a column of repeaters and pea shooters, so nothing could stop me from beating it. By the end of the level, I had 3 columns of pea, but unfortunately not in the pool. Day 19 was a copy of Day 1 with some challenges, and so was Day 20. They were both completed in a matter of minutes, so we don't pay much attention to them. Day 21 also had a few challenges, all of which were completed on the first attempt. Day 22 is the legendary last stand level of the Pirate Seas, and all because it has no boards to connect my ship with a zombie one. The only enemies we'll face here are swashbucklers with imp cannons, so combining bloomerang with pea shooter should be enough for that. The zombies had no chance to break through the defense, so I can get a cookie for that. Day 23 repeats Day 2 with some extra challenges, so we're moving to Day 24. It was one of the most interesting and challenging levels of the Pirate Seas, as I almost lost it a few times because of the sprint bean, who was resting after an attack by swashbuckler. Come on buddy, wake up, seagulls are coming to eat you! Anyway, with the help of the plant food, the green body was saved and the rest of the level went pretty much fine. We not only unlocked the cherry bomb, but we also unlocked a delicious fried chicken from the Wild West, but that's the next chapter. You might consider the Wild West an easy world like the Pirate Seas, but everything isn't that simple, and soon you'll understand why. The Wild West began with funny music and minecarts, so let's enjoy this simplicity by beating the very first level with only a few pea shooters. At first, I thought to do that without the plant foods, but I didn't want to lose the minecarts, so my choice was obvious. Day 2 had already introduced us to the Prospector zombie, but a single iceberg latches can solve the problem. Day 3 is an official day of bok choy and annoying piano music. Everybody has a plan until they get hit. That's what happened with the piano man, and that will happen with the rest of the zombies. By Day 5, Johnny the Walnut became useful again, as we had to deal with the Poncho zombie. Even though I placed a ton of repeaters and bloomerangs, that's not enough to easily counter the Poncho zombie with a toaster, so sacrificing Johnny is the only way to stop it. It is only Day 5, but it already feels like the hardest levels of the Pirate Seas. Let us see what is coming next. Day 6 was the first last stand level of the Wild West, and we were already at the brink of beating it. If Pirate Seas gave us around 3000 suns for the level, in the Wild West that number has dropped to around 2000. In addition, those minecarts have forced me to place everything a few columns closer to the zombies, which isn't good, to say the least. My main tactic was to force the zombie waves to come as quickly as possible, so that if something went wrong, the lawnmowers would do the rest of the work. Fortunately, not a single lawnmower was lost. Day 7 is like Day 5, but on steroids. At this point, my strategy has already started to shift from using the bloomerang to using bok choy in combination with Johnny. What about the minecarts? I'm not a big fan of using them, specifically because they require extra attention, and I can't imagine paying more attention to the loan. Day 10 is the official day of the KFC chicken, as Chicken Wrangler has finally brought his chickens to my farm. First of all, to make sure that my sunflowers and bloomerangs are protected, I placed a lane of Johnnies, and only then did I start defeating the angry chickens. In low numbers, it is an easy enemy, but when there are too many of them, it turns into a trouble. However, the Bloomerang is a reliable body, which is why we are moving to the next level. On day 11 I had to spend no more than 500 suns, but placing 5 pea shooters for each lane would be too obvious and boring, so I choose minecarts and bloomerangs instead. Oh, and here is the Iceberg latches, who is freezing the zombies, letting bloomerangs do the dirty work. I couldn't forget to tell you about this scene, because this was the first fight of plants and bulls. Actually, defeating the bull zombies isn't that hard, especially if you place a plant right before it, so he throws the imp right on the walnut. In addition, the bok choy surprised me with its efficiency in defeating the dynamite man at the back of the yard. What a good way to deal with a grandpa. Day 14 along with day 15 was completed in a few minutes, and I've got nothing to say about them. Look, it is Johnny placed on the banana cell. We have to defend him. Day 16 contained a massive number of zombies, but fortunately I placed enough plants to stop the horde and save Johnny. I thought that day 17 would be one of the hardest levels of the Wild West, as we had a flower lane and a few bulls. However, only the toaster zombie was able to reach the lane of nuts, and it was not in the best shape. When I thought that the Wild West was as easy as the Pirate Seas, day 18 occurred. When I first entered this level, I supposed that it was going to remind us of the first Last Stand level in the Wild West, but my first attempt didn't even halt to the middle of the level. Okay, maybe I did something wrong, so I decided to place some more potato mines at the back of the lawn, so Prospector Zombie wouldn't eat my bok choy from behind. Yeah, it technically worked, but the end result was similar to the previous one. At least I survived until the final wave, so now I know what am I working with. On the next attempt, I decided to place bok choy closer to the zombies, but that made everything even worse, so the problem wasn't in its placement. After repeating the same strategy over and over, I decided to shift focus from defending the nuts to defending the bok choy, and the minecarts have finally become useful. Even though the next few attempts weren't successful, I got a small hope that with the right circumstances, I could survive this level and save my hearts for some of the next worlds. Attempt after attempt, remembering timecodes and zombies, I finally had a hope that this was the victory, and I was right, because everything worked so well that not a single lawnmower was lost while beating it. I could never imagine that I would really be struggling in the Wild West, spending over half an hour beating one of the levels. If everything is going that hard in one of the first worlds, I can't imagine what is waiting for me in the future. Do you know what is the true relaxation? It is to play a chill level right after a crazy one. I've got nothing much to say about it, and I'm happy with it, because I received so many emotions over the past half an hour. I've gotten a bit crazy at this point, so I decided to beat day 21 without using sunflowers, but that didn't go so well. First, there were too many zombies, and second, the Dynamite Man is one who is annoying me, and annoying a lot. I was already tired at this point, so I decided to beat this level without showing any skills. On day 23 I fried so many chickens that not even KFC can compare with me. Compared to day 18, protecting 3 Johnnies on day 24 was an easy task. Despite many bugs during the level, the defense was so strong that all the zombies were destroyed before reaching the first tile. Even the final wave with its lane of bulls was nothing compared to 2 lanes of repeaters and bloomerangs. As a result of the final battle of the Wild West, we unlocked a Wintermelon, which also opens the gates to the freezing world of the Frostbite Caves. Frostbite Caves became my main concern for the early stages of the challenge. I was worried that this was the end for my worm plants, because none of them could survive the freezing cold of prehistory. Fortunately, on day 1 there were no cold wines, so we could defeat the zombies in the way we used to. Day 2 was pretty much the same as the first one, but instead of frozen nuts, we got frozen repeaters. With the help of the bok choy, they got back into life and became useful. At this point, I've got only 2 ways of dealing with ice, and none of them are cheap. The first one is of course the bloomerang. It was especially useful on day 4 when Hunter Zombie appeared on the lawn with a ton of annoying snowballs. However, the problem comes when the plants are frozen backward, because Bloomerang doesn't know what is backward. 2 minutes ago I was telling you my fears about playing the Frostbite caves, and just on day 6 they began to come true. Thank you so much PopCap for giving me so many useless plans, because now I'm left with only a few available seed slots. Everything was going pretty much fine until the first wave, when a cold wind froze 80% of my plants, including bloomerangs. Even though I had a plant food to clear one of the lanes, the situation didn't become better since then, and all of my plants were frozen right before the final wave. Excuse me, but what should I do in this case? Of course, play it once again. This time I didn't repeat a mistake that I made before the final wave on the previous attempt and left some free tiles for melting the ice. Not without the losses and being one step away from the failure, but I held on and defeated all the remaining zombies, and that's what I call a true success. Everything went so smoothly on both day 7 and day 9, so I've got nothing to say about them. It was so satisfying to play them. It was actually a needed rest, because I knew what was waiting for me in a few minutes. Day 11 of the Frostbite Caves is actually one of the hardest levels in the entire game, and I already knew how difficult it was going to be. If you thought we were previously stuck with zombie spam, I don't know how would you call this level, because the number of tough zombies in a single cell was immense. I spent over half an hour trying to beat it without seeing any success, but I still kept trying. I tried literally everything and every strategy that came into my mind, but still no success. I'm not gonna lie, at one point I gave up and decided to skip this level, but something inside me told that this level is possible and I just need to find the working strategy to do that. I'm not losing a life right now, because we will come back to this level after finishing the entire world. Someone might say, come on, just lose a life and let's go to the next levels, but you just don't know what is waiting next. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the Frostbite Caves, and I didn't expect it to be so hard. Another 30 minutes of my life were spent searching for successful combinations of Repeater and Bloomerang, but nothing was working. You have to understand that it's not a typical last stand level where you can place the plants and watch them dealing with zombies. Before adding a bang chai into these combinations, all of my attempts were failing right in the final wave, so I had to find the timecodes for placing bloomerangs and bang chai in order to break the ice on Repeater. You might think that I'm complaining about the hardness of this level, but I never actually enjoyed PVZ 2 as much as I did while beating these levels. I just want to show you how hard this challenge is and how much I struggled while completing the so-called easy levels. It is so satisfying to say that this level was successfully completed. Day 13 became a huge disappointment as I was preparing for a really hard level, but instead I got just a hard level. Don't get me wrong, but even a level with a gargantuar and a flower lane couldn't surprise me anymore. Hell yeah, protecting the pepper pult placed on the banana cell. That's what I wanted to see from the Frostbite Caves, because yet another insanely hard level with multiple plant combination and timecodes is waiting for me. However, do not make a joke out of that, as the Dodo Rider was making me really angry. While normal zombies were pushing the pedals and moving across the lanes, the Dodo Rider didn't care about that, and instead he was forcing a poor bird to fly over the pedals. Well, at least some plants were never frozen because they were planted right close to the pepper pult. The key factor for beating this level was of course the bang chai and its punching ability. It is extremely hard to imagine completing day 15 without it, so pay attention to the punching body. Day 17 was beaten in about 3 minutes, so I didn't have much time to enjoy the appearance of Fume Shroom and Chart Guard. On day 19, the bang chai was already playing a key role in beating the level, as no one except him could smash so much ice on a single level. Compared to Bloomerang, bang chai is able to smash the ice around him and, if it's needed, deal with any kind of zombie that comes close. Meanwhile, the Bloomerang is unable to even deal with the Dodo Rider, which says a lot about its usability. Even though many plants were frozen on day 20, the level didn't become a problem because of the plant foods. After entering the final wave, we received a few plant foods when the lawnmower took down the bottom zombies, so I was able to deal with the upper ones using a plant food ability of a bloomerang. The second plant food was never used, as the remaining plants could easily take down a few zombies. Guys, did you miss chickens? Because I did. However, it's not a problem anymore, as Day 22 has finally introduced us to the whistle zombie, which is carrying whistles like the chicken wrangler. Considering the fact that sometimes Johnny the Walnut can be frozen, we should be really careful with little bodies, as they can occasionally consume the plants or even break the defense. Well, at least one of the crocodiles had survived until the end. Day 23 may remind you of Day 11, however, it is not nearly as hard as the latter, because Day 23 was more about the dodos and the whistles, rather than ice cubes and the zombie spam. Day 24 became one of the 9 levels, as we had an additional requirement of gathering 2500 suns. You might consider it low, but do not forget which world we are playing in now and how many scenes can stop the sun production in just a second. My first attempt failed because I tried to combine bok choy with a repeater, but the key to beating this level is actually using only bok choy as an attacking plant. Of course, I didn't get enough sun by the end of the level, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't sacrifice Johnny to one of the zombies to get enough time to collect enough suns. I can say that Day 26 wasn't a hard one, but the bok choy strategy is so effective that even the hard levels began to feel much easier than they used to. The first and the main rule for using bok choy is to always leave the tile between the sunflower and the second bok choy so you can unfreeze them if it's needed. The second rule is to pay attention to what is happening on the lawn and which type of zombie are coming close to you, because you have to react fast and agile. Whether you have to deal with whistle or ice cube, bok choy will punch anyone you want to. Another half an hour was spent on Day 27 because defending rutabagas isn't similar to defending banana launcher. This time the key problem was gargantuars, because we faced 3 of them on a single level, 1 before the final wave and 2 after. To defeat them, you need to save enough plant foods and pre-plant the potato mine in the right place. On my first attempt, I didn't know about that, and that's why I failed one step away from beating it. However, the second attempt went much better, as I knew what to expect and how to deal with the gargantuars. Day 28 was the second last stand level of the Frostbite Caves, where I had 2500 suns to prepare the defense and 0 knowledge about the level space. On my first attempt, I decided to find out how far the cold wind can freeze my plants and how long a typical defense can last against the mix of prehistoric Ice Age zombies. I was actually surprised that my very first attempt had succeeded, and we survived until the final wave, which is good. Now that we know that the level is possible, the only thing that is left to do is to find the right way to beat it. This time it required only 20 minutes and a few different placements of bok choy, so on my final attempt I lost only 2 lawnmowers. So it was the final level of the Frostbite Caves, and now we can move to... wait, how about Day 11? Okay, let's do it. Now, with all the knowledge I've got after beating the Frostbite Caves, Day 11 was beaten on the first attempt, and the main secret for beating it is the bok choy. The combination of Green Body and Johnny the Walnut creates an amazing duo which is capable of stopping an immense zombie horde. Not even the dodo bird was able to break through such a defense, because I always had 2 bok choys at the back of the lawn. Well, at the end of the level I made a few mistakes because I lost 2 bok choys for no reason while trying to feed them with a plant food. However, the third one had succeeded, and the remaining hunter zombies couldn't pose a threat to us. Now, with that been done, the Frostbite Caves are finished, which means that we're moving to the Lost City with all 3 hearts in the pocket. Day 1 of the Lost City is one of my favorite levels in the game. Why? Because you don't have to plant any sunflowers to succeed. Just feed the gold tiles with your favorite plants and the victory is yours. Day 2 introduced us to the Red Stinger, a few of which I had immediately dug up because their positioning was pretty much useless. However, it allowed me to set up a strong defense line, which then protected my sunflowers from the lost pilot zombie. Don't worry, it's not our main concern, because the problematic zombies will appear pretty soon. Day 4 of the Lost City has entirely changed my strategy for beating the levels, and that's all because of the excavator zombie. I don't really know why I decided to take Bloomerang instead of a cabbage pult, since the latter is a universal way to defeat the zombies with the golden shovels. For most of the levels, my lawn was looking like a total mess, or maybe it was a French frontline in Verdun in 1916. Anyway, the level was completed and it taught me a lot about the local gameplay. On day 6, I was already beating the level with a cabbage pult, and that's why I love playing with plants from ancient Egypt. Each of them has a unique mechanics, so you never know when this or that plant can become useful. Remember, there are no useless plants in ancient Egypt, as each is designed to be useful in a specific case, and today is one of them. Oh yeah, freezing the zombies with a plant food of iceberg ledges and then defeating them is one of the best things you can experience in PVZ 2. Day 7 has also affected how we play the game, because it was the first time we encountered the parasol zombie. I was already prepared for its appearance, so a lady with a parasol couldn't surprise me anymore. Remember that if you want to beat the Lost City with the least casualties, the first thing you need is a good tactic which combines defeating both parasol and the excavator, and in my case, the solution is simple. I combine cabbage pult with the bok choy, so no one has a chance to defeat me. On day 10, I had to plant my sunflowers closer to the mid lane to get more sun from the gold tiles, which led to a slight shift in my tactic from using bok choy to Bloomerang. The latter is also a good choice for defeating both the excavator and the parasol, so use it if it's needed. Day 11 was pretty much the same, except for the appearance of the giant annoying bugs, but even they couldn't stop my plans from successfully finishing yet another level of the Lost City. Day 12 is probably one of the most well-known levels of the Lost City, and that's because of an additional goal of gathering 5000 suns. This time the additional challenge didn't become a problem at all, and the level was beaten in just 3 minutes. Day 15 was dedicated to defending A keys that are placed on the banana cells, and I can say that defending them was really enjoyable because none of the zombies could get close to them. Plus, I didn't have to worry about their placement, as the bok choy was the ultimate answer to this question. Compared to the Frostbite caves with its freezing wind, the Lost City was much easier, at least at this point. The second half of the Lost City also contains specific zombies, but I'm sure that we will be able to deal with them. Day 17 was the first day we encountered an imp with a tent, and this body has to be destroyed immediately, as I don't want to see any additional zombies on my lawn. Thanks to the correct placement of bok choy, the little imps had no chance to place their tents, and the level was successfully completed. Day 19 is a prime example of what can happen if tents are placed, so we should be really careful with those imps. On day 20, we had so many available sun tiles that the question of sun has never arisen. It also led to the preparation of a strong defense line, so neither excavator nor parasol broke through the lanes of bok choys and bloomerangs. Everything was going fine on day 23 up until the Indiana Jones came onto the lawn. While the first zombie was defeated with the help of the potato mine, the others came immediately along with Porter Garg, and I was a bit confused because of that. Honestly, that was the biggest pressure we faced so far in the Lost City, and I wasn't ready for it. However, with the help of the Johnny the Walnut, the zombie horde was stopped and not a single lone mover was lost. At first, I thought that day 24 would be one of the hardest, but the number of zombies wasn't high enough to create a lot of pressure, so the level was beaten with no problems. Day 25 and I'm once again playing with the Bloomerang and bok choy. This level was pretty much similar to the previous one, and that's why we're going to the next one. Oh, and the same goes for day 26. However, day 27 was a turning point, as the blue skull zombie was frying my plants like a fried chicken in the Wild West. It is by far the most problematic zombie we've faced in the Lost City, because we can't do much about it. However, it was just the beginning of the problems, because the second wave brought in many more zombies and my defense were already in a poor shape. Everything became even worse after the final wave because one of the lone movers was already lost and I had to deal with the upper lane at any cost. I was thinking that this was the end for me and the level had to be replayed, but fortunately luck was on my side and I left with 250 suns and a buckethead, so I could sacrifice Johnny and place a bunk chai to defeat the buckethead. Yeah, I was one step away from failing it, but I didn't. Day 29 was also about an immense zombie spam, and the only way to beat it is to survive to the final wave, and the rest of the work is going to be done by the lone movers. Golden Shovels, Indiana Jones, Imps, and one Gargantuar all attempted to break my defense, but I managed to survive until the final wave and even defeated one of the Gargantuars. That's what I call a success. They thought it was beaten in less than 3 minutes, and the only goal for this level was to survive until the final wave to let the lone movers do the rest of the work. You might consider it an easy level, but it's not. It was hard to stop the Indiana Jones from jumping on the final tile where plants can be placed, but we survived. Then I was trying to defeat all the zombies as fast as possible to provoke the final wave, and guess what? This strategy worked like a Swiss clock, and the only thing that I had to do was to secure the middle lane from the tent and the remaining zombies. With that being done, the Lost City is officially completed, hearts are saved, and we're now moving to the future, to the far future. I won't lie if I say that I love the vibe of the far future. It was created around the same time as the first 3 worlds, so it's not a big surprise that it looks similar to the Pirate Seas or the Wild West. Oh yeah, what about day 1? It was an absolute pleasure to play the level with simple plants like pea shooter and sunflower. Day 2 was pretty much the same as the first one, with the only difference being the shield zombie, which is kinda annoying. Day 3 was easy as well, so we're skipping it. Day 4 was a minigame level where I had to collect sun bombs in order to get suns. Fortunately, the level gives you enough sun to place any plants you want to, so it wasn't hard to complete it. Day 5 was the first time we met the robot Conehead, which has double the HP of a Buckethead. Even though this zombie is slow and it has no special mechanics, we should be really careful when dealing with it, as it is a tough body who can easily consume Johnny. On day 6, I had to survive the zombie attack with the given plants, and fortunately the plants that were given to me are ones that I play with in this challenge, so I decided to include this level in today's challenge. What's interesting is that Bunk Chai became useful once again, as it's one of the best plants that can break through the holographic shield of the shield zombie. Yet, Pea Shooter was also useful, though not as much as the Bunk Chai. On day 7 I had to deal with lots of Rubicones, and the best thing I found to do was plant 2 columns of repeaters alongside a column of bloomerangs. To understand how tough the Rubicone is, let's compare its HP to Gargantuar's. While Rubicon Head has 2500 HP, the Prime Gargantuar has 3600 HP, which is only 1/3 bigger than the Rubicones. That's why you shouldn't underestimate the zombie in a Rubicone costume. On day 9 I had to beat the level with no more than 15 plants on the lone, and I won't lie, the level was easy, especially since I replaced sunflowers with repeaters. Day 10 introduced us to one of the most annoying enemies of the far future, and that is the Discatron 3000. I can't say that defeating this zombie is hard to do, but the flying disco zombies annoy me a lot, because they absorb the damage that should have come to the other zombies. Besides that, everything was going so well that I was capable of placing 2 lanes of repeaters alongside 2 lanes of bloomerangs and even a few Bunk Chais right after them. Day 11 was the first last stand level of the far future, and I decided to beat it by placing a lane of each of my favorite plants, including potato mines. Unfortunately, I didn't have enough sun to place Johnny, so that's why he was absent today. Everything was going so well that all the plants except a single Bunk Chai managed to survive until the end, and the level was completed on the very first attempt. On day 12 I had my first fight with the Prime Gargs, and I can say that this was the most dangerous Gargantuar we've seen so far, not because it is scary looking, but because it has a laser that can fry your plants like a chicken in the Wild West. However, I saved enough plant foods to stop them, so even the dangerous Gargs didn't become a problem for me. On day 13, I encountered my first few mecha football zombies, which I immediately defeated using a repeater's plant food ability. Day 14 had to be beaten with only 1500 suns, and I decided that it was the right time to combine pea shooter with cabbage pult, especially since I didn't take any sunflowers with me. Oh yeah, the cabbage rain was an absolute banger. Day 15 was dedicated to the protection of citrons, and I guess that it isn't that hard to place a nut right before them so citrons can do their work while Johnny gets the damage. After gathering enough suns, I decided to block all the zombies on the first tile so my defense became symmetric. I rate this level at 11 orange pulps out of 10. On day 18, we had to gather 6000 suns to beat the level, and honestly, it wasn't that hard with the number of plant foods we received throughout the level. In my opinion, the Frostbite Caves or even the Lost City were way harder than the far future, so this world gives me a bit of relaxation before we enter the next stage of the hardness. Day 19 was the second level with the falling sun bombs, and this time I decided to beat it by using only pea shooter. No, that's not a joke. The only plant that was used while beating this level is the pea shooter. Even though lots of green bodies were lost to the Discatron 3000 and the Prime Garg, we managed to hold on and all the lone movers were in the right place. Day 20 was the only level so far that I didn't complete on my first attempt, and that's all because I didn't pay so much attention to the placement of the attacking plants. However, on my second attempt, everything went fine and the starfruit did half of the job of protecting itself. Always remember to place your plants correctly, otherwise the zombies will eat them. On day 21 we once again had to gather the needed amount of sun, but this time with a limited number of plants. At first I planted a column of repeaters and bloomerangs to protect the lawn, and then, after gathering the needed amount of sun, I replaced the lane of twin sunflowers with the lane of repeaters. If you are playing the far future right now, I highly recommend using this strategy to successfully beat day 21. Day 22 was the second last stand level, and here I had to set up a defensive line with only 2250 suns. I didn't create anything new because I still remember the strategy I used 2 years ago to beat PVZ 2 with only PVZ 1 plants, so I decided to use it again since nothing new came to my mind. The main point of this strategy is to use the plant food ability of the repeater at a correct time, so you save almost all plants up until the final wave. Then you can allow the lone mover to do the rest of the work for you. In my case, I lost only 2 lone movers, which is a good result. Nothing special has happened on day 23, so I suggest moving to the final one. Day 24 was the third level with the falling sun bombs, and here the number of tough zombies was immense. Discatron 3000, Mecha Football Zombie, Robo Conehead, and so on. They all appeared in great numbers, so it was really tough to stop them all. However, we managed to deal with all the robots without losing any of the lone movers, which means that the far future is successfully completed, and now we can move on to the Dark Ages and its tough levels. Dark Ages was one of the worlds I wasn't worrying about much because I had a sunflower and a bunk chai, so 95% of the problems are already solved, including an annoying Jester zombie. But hey, that's only night 1, so let's have some fun. Combining cabbage pult with pea shooter was enough to defeat the coneheads, especially when you've got some plant foods in your pocket. Night 2 was easy as well, and this time we were fighting bucket heads instead of cone heads. Night 3 has already introduced us to the necromancy, and that's why the Gravebuster is becoming my best friend. Even though I didn't use it much in ancient Egypt, the Gravebuster became really useful in the Dark Ages, so you never know which plant may become useful. Night 5 was the first night to include the Jester zombie, but fortunately we've got a bunk chai and the Johnny the Walnut to defeat the clown. The main problem with having Jester on the level is that it becomes really hard to mount a sustainable defense since most projectiles return to the sender. Night 6 was the first last stand level of the Dark Ages, for which I had only 2000 suns to spend on the plants. Unfortunately, some of my bloomerangs didn't even hold a minute, as Jester Zombie had immediately come into the lane. By the final wave, I was left with only a lane of bok choy and a lane of walnuts, which were then consumed by the remaining zombies. Despite only a few plants surviving the final attack, none of the lawnmowers were activated. Everything went fine on night 7, and that's because I started preparing my defense right after planting the very first sunflowers. It was also the first level to include the night zombie, however, the night zombie is nothing without a zombie king. On night 9, the zombies were boosted with evil potions, but that didn't change anything. Maybe that's because the evil potions weren't so strong, or maybe that's because I was sticking to my strategy so that even the evil potions couldn't change this situation. However, it was also the first level where I defeated Jester using my beloved Iceberg glitches, so don't mess around with a nice buddy. I'm not gonna lie, I was scared of the wizard zombie on night 11, so I did my best to defeat it as fast as possible, so none of the plants became a sheep. Even though the level contained the Jester zombie, I still planted a column of repeaters because it was the most efficient way to get rid of wizard zombies. Night 12 was an unusual night because here we had to protect the pop shrooms not from being eaten, but more like from disappearing. It is important to mention that the level contained both wizard and jester zombie, so we had to be careful with using plant foods and placing the correct plants. When jester was coming, I was digging up the repeaters so bok choy could do the rest of the work. However, my favorite way to defeat them is to freeze the entire lane with the plant food ability of an Iceberg lettuce. I have a few words to say about Night 14, so you don't misunderstand me. The main goal for this level was to gather 5000 suns without using sunflowers or any other sun-producing plant. On my first attempt, I tried to beat it by destroying all the available sun graves, but unfortunately, this only gave me 3400 suns, so we are moving to the next level. Even though I didn't spend much time on Night 15, it was a hell of a mess. At first, the zombies had almost eaten my walnuts and I had only 75 suns to replace them. Then the wizard zombies appeared and I had to use all of my plant foods to stop them. When I finally saw that I was doing fine, the jester came out onto the lawn and broke me. Even the early activation of the down lawnmower didn't save me because the zombies had appeared on the same lane on the final wave and I couldn't do anything about them. On my second attempt, I decided to replace all the plants one tile closer to the zombies, and guess what? Such a little change has drastically shifted the situation, so I left with all the lawnmowers by the final wave, which means that the victory was already in my pocket. Sometimes it's not about the gameplay, but it's about survival. Even before entering the Dark Ages, I already knew that Night 16 is gonna be a nightmare, and if I survive it, then the rest of the journey will be fine. The main problem here is that you don't have enough time to prepare a sustainable defense, but you already have to deal with Wizard along with the King Zombie, which is the worst enemy you can imagine. It is already hard to deal with a single Night Zombie, and imagine that you've got the whole lane of Night Zombies. This might seem an impossible level, but fortunately it's not. If you want to beat this level as I did, first forget about using repeater or bloomerang, and second use only 3 plants: bok choy, potato mine and walnut. Try to defeat the king zombie as fast as possible, and if you have a plant food, give it to the bok choy, so he defeats the zombies in the surrounding lanes as well. Remember that the main goal for this level is not to defeat all the zombies, but instead it is to do your best to survive until the final wave with all the lawnmowers. Compared to the previous level, Night 17 couldn't surprise me anymore because some of the features I've previously told you about were used on that level as well. The plant food ability of the bok choy is one of the strongholds of this challenge, so never forget to feed your cabbage with a delicious plant food, especially if you're surrounded by wizard zombies. Night 19 was one of the easiest levels we've faced so far, and that's because defending the magnet shrooms is the best thing you can imagine. It not only counters the night zombie, but it also makes the king zombie pretty much useless, since his ability has no usage. Everything was going so well that a major part of the zombies were neglected even before making the first step onto the lawn. Not even the medieval gargantuar could change the situation, which means that the 7th world in the face of the Dark Ages has been successfully completed and not a single level was lost. Here comes the world I was most worried about, the Neon Mixtape Tour. This world is the definition of rhythm changes and speed, and I'm not sure that all the levels here are possible. However, you can't succeed before you try, so let's give it a try. I didn't want to risk and play with a regular pea shooter on day 1, so taking a repeater with Bloomerang was the right choice, especially since so many bucketheads have appeared. Well, we hold on, and that's a good signal. It's day 2 and I'm already smelling the metal objects, because the punk zombie had already entered the lawn. It may not be my biggest concern in the Neon Mixtape Tour, since the punk zombie does not affect the gameplay. However, I should be really careful when dealing with it, as I don't want my plans to be kicked out of the lawn. Day 4 was the level that defined the tactic for the rest of the journey, because only the repeater together with Bloomerang is able to stop the zombie horde before they either smash or consume my plants. The other insanely useful plant in this world is of course an Iceberg, which is the only plant that is able to break the insane rhythm of the Neon Mixtape Tour. It is also the first world where the Lone Mover was already lost on day 4, and even a good defense line couldn't change that. Well, that's interesting. On day 5, both Johnny the Walnut and a big fat beat had to be protected from being kicked out of the lawn. The first trouble was spotted right after the first wave, when a massive zombie spam occurred on the middle lane, and I couldn't afford to lose it so early, so only the plant food ability of the repeater has stabilized the situation. Before the final wave, the plant food ability of an Iceberg saved me from a total collapse, because all the zombies were frozen like ice cream in the grocery store. With 1% of the luck and 99% of the skill, the final wave was defeated and yet another level of the Neon Mixtape Tour was completed. I was honestly surprised by day 7, because the zombies were coming at an insane speed even before I planted 2 columns of sunflowers. If only this were the problem, I wouldn't be so excited. But then, even before the first wave, a few glitter zombies with a group of fans were coming from 3 directions, and I had to stop it with a lane of repeaters. Do I have to say that my first attempt had total collapse, or it was kinda obvious? However, on my second attempt, I already knew about everything that was waiting for me, so I prepared much better than I had a few minutes ago. Of course, with a bit of luck and a lot of calculations, the level was completed, but I was always one step away from a total collapse. This was probably the biggest number of bucketheads that I witnessed on day 7 of any world. Don't worry, day 8 was as hard as the previous one, but now, instead of an insane number of bucketheads, we saw an insane number of punk zombies. Yet, with a huge experience of beating day 7, day 8 couldn't surprise me so much. If we could repeat the Battle of Somme of 1916 in Plants vs Zombies 2, then I think that day 8 of the Neon Mixtape Tour would become the best illustration of it. This time the level was beaten primarily with the help of the Bong Choi's plant food ability. I won't lie if I say that this challenge is unimaginable without the Bong Choi, especially at a late stage. Even though including day 9 was kinda optional, I decided to share my experience of beating that level with only pea shooters. There is no special tactic for placing those pea shooters, rather I suggest placing them as much as possible. Of course, the glitter zombie together with punk zombie will break the defense, but attempt to gather those 5000 suns as soon as possible, so the game won't punish you not for doing that. You know, at this point, not even a gargantuar on day 12 could surprise me, since it became really hard to surprise me with anything in this game. I'm currently feeling like Iron Man, who is capable of doing anything, no matter how difficult or even impossible it might sound. However, the hair metal Garg shouldn't be underestimated, as this is the most dangerous gargantuar in the game, especially when its metal theme is playing. This time not a single lone mover was lost, and I consider that a huge success. Day 13 is a pretty specific level, to say the least. For as low as 2000 cents, you have to defeat a gigantic number of zombies, and that's not an exaggeration. It is undoubtedly one of the hardest remaining levels in the adventure mode of Plants vs Zombies 2, as not a single lost end level in this game can be compared with Day 13 of the Neon Mixtape Tour. I tried literally everything, every strategy that came into my mind, and as far as I got with only Jeep 10 plants was around 75% of the level, and there were still lots of zombies staying on the lone. I know that some of you were waiting for that, but yeah, this is the first impossible level with only Jeep 10 plants in this challenge, and this is the first time I'm losing a life. What am I feeling now? Well, I'm really impressed that I've got so far without losing a single life, because when I started this challenge, I thought I would already lose it by the far future or the dark ages. However, we are standing strong and there are 2 more lives that are remaining in my pocket. Compared to everything we saw previously, day 15 was a chill day, because defending the fat beat is far from being hard. Even though I failed my first attempt, the second one went fine, but I was still one step away from failing it, as zombies from the final wave were consuming lots of plants only to stay away from a fat beat. Day 17 was the first level including a breakdancer zombie, which makes the game feel even faster because of its kicks. I can't say that everything went smoothly during the level, because all the sunflowers were already lost after the first wave. However, thanks to the bunk chai at the final wave, we finished the level with all the lone movers. Nothing special was happening on boss day 10 and day 20, so skipping them would be the best choice. At first, I thought that day 21 is a hard one, because we've got a flower lane and a gargantuar, and I don't like to see those things combined. The main tip for beating this level is to prepare a good defense as fast as possible, because if you defeat the first wave and its zombies, then the 80% of the victory is already in your pocket. What about the hair metal Gark? He was defeated by combining Bunk Choi and the Repeater, and if something went wrong, I always had a potato mine for this case. Day 23 is an official day of my favorite pixel zombies, which I was stopping by using 2 lanes of Repeaters and a lane of Bunk Choi. Despite my big love for an arcade machine and pixel zombies, the Minecraft tape buddies have to be stopped immediately, as I don't want to turn my lone into Lego or Minecraft. On day 24, I decided to use one of the strategies that I applied on day 13 while trying to beat this horrible level. What impressed me the most was that I managed to beat this lost end level on my very first attempt, despite having more problematic and dangerous zombies. Yet, the main difference between this last stand and the previous one is the number of zombies. This level isn't surely an easy one, especially when you know that it includes 3 gargantuars. However, it doesn't have an immense amount of spam, like day 13, and I also need to mention that I accidentally clicked on the Zap power-up at the end of the level. However, it didn't affect the gameplay, and that's why the level wasn't restarted. I've gotten used to the hardness of the Neon Mixtape Tour, so it's really hard to say anything new about day 25. However, I should say that the hardest levels of this world are already passed, and I'm still impressed that only one of them didn't become possible. Actually, I thought that the Neon Mixtape Tour would become the final world of the challenge, and that's why I called it How Far Can I Beat PVZ 2 instead of my typical names you saw on the previous challenges. Day 26 contained mushrooms. A lot of mushrooms. At the beginning of the level, all of these mushrooms were relocated to the safe place thanks to the punk zombies, so I wasn't worrying about their placement anymore. By the first wave, I have already organized a lane of repeaters together with numerous randomly placed mushrooms, so we were doing pretty much fine. By the final wave, the hair metal Gark had appeared, and it was the only enemy that broke the defense, but fortunately that wasn't an endangered lane. Day 28 was a day of a suspicious music produced by the boombox zombie. Despite my plans holding up pretty well, the situation was far from being good. It was only the first appearance of a boombox, and it had already caused us so many troubles. At this point, I had only one goal in my mind: to survive this mess and go to the next level. Considering that the final wave wasn't so hard, sacrificing the lawnmowers was the right choice. Despite the appearance of the boombox zombie on day 29, my gameplay didn't change much as its numbers were not enough to hypnotize my plants without a stop. It was honestly so strange to see that the final levels of the Neon Mixtape Tour were nothing compared to the levels we faced previously. And just when I told you that, day 30 came in with its restriction: never have more than 15 plants. Actually, I don't usually have more plants, but this time it was so necessary to plant more than 15 plants because the zombie spam had begun even before I finished planting my sunflowers. Yet the first column of repeaters and then the second has managed to control this situation. Everything was going so well that even one of the hair metal gorks couldn't make a few steps further onto the lawn. Congratulations, we have finally completed the final level of the Neon Mixtape Tour, which means that now we are moving to the Jurassic Marsh with 2 more hearts in the pocket. If the insane rhythm of the 1980s was taken under our control, then the dinosaurs won't cause us any troubles. This was my main thought while beating day 1 as I got ready to deal with the reptiles. I can also say that this is already the hardest day 1 we faced so far, as it included both fossil heads and bucket heads. However, I'm really excited about the upcoming levels, so let's jump right into them. The main difference between day 1 and day 2 was the addition of a blue raptor. Some of you might consider it a small change, however, this dinosaur has significantly affected the way we play the Jurassic Marsh, so do not underestimate the blue reptile. Day 4 is unimaginable without Johnny the Walnut, because my new friend was kicking everybody closer to my sunflowers. I may understand lots of things in this game, but 4 dinosaurs at the final wave were way more than enough to impress me. It's day 5 of the Jurassic Marsh, and it seems that having 2 columns of sunflowers is a new type of luxury, because the blue body doesn't leave me a single chance to hold up a good sun production. However, despite all the buts, the final wave was completed with 2 lanes of repeaters and a lane of sunflowers, and that's what I call a success. Day 6 was similar to day 5, so we are moving to the next one. On day 8 we implemented the same strategy as on day 6, and it allowed us to counter a new dinosaur. It is one of the least dangerous reptiles of the Jurassic Marsh, as delivering the zombies to the random tiles isn't the best strategy to break me. For example, the blue raptor is doing the same job, but with a known trajectory, so the appearance of the Stegosaurus didn't affect my gameplay. However, day 10 became an absolute mess because Pterosaur is a real game changer and we don't have an easy way to deal with it. First of all, we have to remember that my defense is built around the repeaters, and the repeater is useless against the zombies that are coming from behind, which means that the bok choy is the only viable solution I've got today. By the time we reached the 3rd wave, my lawn was looking like a total mess, which is okay for the Jurassic Marsh. However, despite everything I told you, the level was completed without losing a lawnmower. On day 11, I discovered my first solution to the Pterosaur problem. Instead of placing bok choy on the 5th lane, we should place it right between the sunflower and the repeater, just like we did in the Frostbite caves. It provided so many benefits for our defense, so I wasn't worried much about the loss of sunflower, as I always knew that the lane is protected thanks to the bok choy. Day 12 was the first problematic day of the Jurassic Marsh, because we couldn't lose more than 6 plants in the level, and the Jurassic Marsh is a world about losing a ton of plants. I was doing pretty fine in my first attempt, but the Primal Gork and the Blue Raptor didn't think so. Even though I defeated Gargantuar from the final wave, the same can be said about the reptile. On my second attempt, I counted all the mistakes and prepared some more plant foods for the final wave, which then allowed me to defeat the Primal Gork, and the zombies in the upper lane couldn't pose us any threat. On day 13 we encountered the same problem as on the previous level, so I've got nothing to say about it. Look, it's a Primal Johnny, and it seems that we have to defend him. Day 15 was one of the fastest levels we faced in the Jurassic Marsh, taking me only 3 minutes to complete it. I didn't find anything better than placing a lane of repeaters protected by bok choys. I can say that this level was extremely hard, but it did require a quick reaction to replace a repeater with bok choy when the defense was broken. We also faced yet another Primal Gork, but fortunately it came from a safe lane, so there is nothing to worry about. It is already day 17 and I'm feeling how easy this world is compared to the Neon mixtape tour. Even though the dinosaurs are annoying and they give a significant boost to the zombies, I can say that the mechanics they pose are impossible to counter. Yeah, my loan doesn't look clear in 99% of the cases, but the previous world taught me to solve a wide range of problems, and that's why the dinosaurs became the least one. Here comes a dinosaur which is trying to bring me back to the vibe of the 1980s. Ladies and gentlemen, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Day 18 was the first day he appeared on the loan, and he did it only a few times. Of course, it may cause you some trouble if you have 0 suns, but if you plant a walnut or any other plant in front of the zombies, the speed effect will be disabled. Even though the level landed with only a few plants in the loan, it was still completed on the first attempt, which is really good. On day 20 we had to gather 2000 suns, which was probably the easiest restriction we've faced so far in the Jurassic Marsh. Everything started to change on day 21, when a Jurassic bully became a part of the Jurassic crew. By the first wave, my defense was already facing massive trouble, but that was nothing compared to what we witnessed after this second wave. The zombies were literally everywhere and they were overwhelming the lone, so I had only a few options to stop them. Even though most of the lone movers were activated before the third wave, we saw only a few zombies coming from these lanes after the final wave. Well, I guess that this time the luck was on my side. Day 22 was the first last stand level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I was worrying a lot about it, because you already know how tough it is to stop the prehistoric zombie spam. This time we had as many as 3000 suns for preparing a good defense, so I decided that covering both the first and the fourth lanes with Johnny's was a fantastic decision. That made us protected from the both sides, so the zombie spam couldn't break us so easily. Also, thanks to my fantastic decision to cover the rest of the loan with potato mines, most of the zombies were stopped before they even reached the bunk chai, so I recommend using this strategy to beat day 22. Day 23 contained a lot of primal imps, which can be dangerous in huge numbers, so always remember to take a Johnny with you, so little bodies do not consume the bunk chai. What can I say about day 24? Well, it was pretty much the same as day 23, but the number of zombies was a bit higher and the outcome was the same. Only 2 lone movers survived this zombie attack. And just when I thought that everything would be fine with the rest of the Jurassic Marsh, then Kilosaurus appeared and delivered the zombies right to the third tile, where I usually place my sunflowers. However, if you place anything on the third tile, your plant will be kicked out of the loan, leaving only 2 safe tiles for placing the defense. It is good that this level did not include the flying dinosaur, but what if we got him as well? That question scares me a lot. So let's come to day 25, where I have already fully adapted to Ankylosaurus by the second wave. The only thing that saved me from an early lose of the lone mover was the plant for the ability of a bunk chai, so the green body was especially useful today. On day 26, I can say that even the repeater became useless at that point, because all the plants except walnut and the bunk chai can't do anything with the local mass. This time I had to build a defense on the third and fourth lanes, and that's all because of the green slimes. Yet, the dinosaurs mechanics didn't change because of that, so it was one of the hardest levels we've faced so far in the Jurassic Marsh. Everything was so bad that by the end of the level I left with literally nothing, as all the lone movers and plants were lost. Day 27 was the second last stand level of the Jurassic Marsh, and here I decided to repeat my working strategy from day 22, as nothing else would work under such circumstances. The decision to plant the lawn full of potato mines was one of my best discoveries of this year, because I do not see any other working option to beat the last stand level at such a stage. Do you still remember how we beat day 26? If so, then day 28 wouldn't surprise you at all, as it was beaten in the same way, but this time we didn't lose a single lone mover, and the lane of nuts and cabbage were standing strong. Day 30 was a day without Ankylosaurus, so we could finally start using our previous strategy on the final level of the Jurassic Marsh. Everything was going so well on this day that by the second wave I had already completed the main defense and even defeated a lot of zombies using a bunk chai placed at the beginning of the lane. Even though everything started to collapse and after the third wave, the main zombie groups were defeated by either lawnmowers or bongchai. By the final wave, the third primal Gark came into the lawn and got right on the lawnmower. With a hilarious death, the Jurassic Marsh is officially finished and I didn't lose a single life while beating it, which impressed me a lot. We're now moving to the Big Wave Beach, a world full of danger and 9 zombies. Unlike all the previous worlds, the Big Wave Beach has a specific feature that we cannot ignore, and that is the water tiles. Even though lily pads isn't a part of the Egyptian crew, it is gonna be used in situations where the level is impossible to beat without using it. I didn't consider using it a big loss because it is still a technical plant, so do not pay much attention to it. Meanwhile, we have completed the first day of the Big Wave Beach with the help of the pea shooters and cabbage pulls. It's day 2 and the water line has already shifted closer to the lawnmowers, so we've got only 3 safe lanes to place our plants. Although I don't take lily pads with me, I can still use a pre-planted one and I was fully enjoying the opportunity to use them. This time I decided to try a new combo for these worlds to see its effectiveness in a new reality. The Bloomerang was exceptionally useful by the second wave, as it was my main weapon against the huge horde, and the Repeater is just an undying classic which I plan to use by the last day of the modern day. Day 4 was similar to Day 2, with the only difference being the number of zombies we faced on each wave. Day 6 is the milestone of the Big Wave Beach, as this is the first level with a snorkel zombie. In my previous challenge, this was one of the hardest enemies we faced because most plants couldn't attack snorkels underwater. However, remember when I said that all the plants from ancient Egypt are useful, and the same goes for the cabbage pult. So, because it's a lobbing plant, it can attack snorkels when they are underwater, which makes the cabbage pult one of the best and most useful plants of the Big Wave Beach. If only I had more space to plant them, the zombies would have no chance to get to the waterline. Day 7 was the first day where I had no safe tiles to place my plants on. However, we had a lot of free lily pads, so the cabbage pools were planted on them. By the first wave we were already doing pretty much fine, and in order to defeat all the zombies, some of the cabbage pools were replaced with walnuts. Although the level contained a ton of bucketheads, which are a tough enemy for a little cabbage, only one lawnmower was lost, which I consider a total victory over the bucketheads. On day 9 we had so many pre-planted lily pads that we were able to organize a good defense line consisting of Johnny and bongchai. The plinfootability of the cabbage pult allowed us to counter a lot of weak zombies, so only top 1 came to the main defense. This was the first time we faced 4 waves of zombies on Big Wave Beach, but even that couldn't break us. It's day 4 and it seems that the game is becoming harder as the surfer zombie is already swimming in the warm waters of the Big Wave Beach. Although it's a tough enemy on the land, it possesses no threat when it's defeated in the water, and only 3 cabbage pools are needed to stop it. Compared to the zombies we will encounter later, the surfer zombie is a bit annoying and must be destroyed immediately to avoid even more trouble. With only the cabbage pult and the occasional help of the bongchai, the level was successfully completed. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the Big Wave Beach, where I decided to combine cabbage pult with the Bloomerang, which was a big mistake, as this defense had already collapsed by the middle of the level, so something had to be replaced. Of course, I'm talking about an expensive Bloomerang, which I substituted with 2 lanes of cabbage. Even though this strategy didn't last much longer than the previous one, it allowed us to survive to the final wave when most of the work was done by the lawnmowers. The level was finished with only a few plants remaining on the lawn, so I was really lucky to beat the day on the second attempt. I was surprised that Day 13 is beatable without the lily pads because we had to gather 2000 suns, and that all had to be done with a single lane of lily pads. Of course, I decided to give all the free space to the cabbage pult, as this is the most reliable plant for defeating the beach zombies. By the time we had reached the second wave, I had only gathered 700 suns, but the number of lily pads had rapidly expanded. After the final wave was easily defeated, I started gathering the needed amount of sun, while Buckethead Zombie was eating a poor Johnny. Day 15 was the first problematic day of the Big Wave Beach, and that's all because of the lily pads. You see, the main goal of this level is to prevent the potato mine from exploding, and the replacement is the best one for exploding. Even though I managed to hold out until the third wave, the water has returned to the shoreline, and that of course destroyed all the plants placed on the water tiles. However, when I decided to add lily pads to my strategy, everything went pretty much fine, and not even the final wave with zombie spam could change the situation. It is day 17 and we have already passed the first part of the big wave beach, and we have to beat the second part, which I know is going to be really hard, especially because of the fisherman. However, on this day we only met the Oxyman, which isn't so annoying in this challenge since I've got lots of plants to deal with little octopuses. On day 19 I could pick only 3 plants, so all of them were chosen wisely. Even though we faced some troubles during the level, I can't call it one of the hardest, which is why we are moving to the next one. It is day 20 and I'm once again playing with a limited number of lily pads. A few minutes ago it was much easier to say that, hey, I beat the level without the lily pads, because there were no Squidwards in the first part of the big wave beach. In fact, there were so many of them that I couldn't find an original one. The only thing I can say for sure is that by the final wave I was one step away from a total collapse, but fortunately all the lone movers were activated in the right moment, so I had no trouble defeating the zombies. On day 22 we met my beloved fisherman zombie for the first time, and I can say that it was a good meeting, because when the fisherman is combined with the naughty guy, it results in a lone with no plans and only a few Squidwards. I still can't believe that a lone full of cabbage pulled before the final wave was turned into a lone with no cabbage in the final wave. It is good that we were lucky enough to beat day 22, but what about the next levels? I'm not really sure about that. Day 23 was one of the easiest levels of the big wave beach, because we had to defend bananas, and everybody loves defending bananas. They are effective, elegant and expensive, so not even the coral garg has a chance to stop them. I really enjoyed defending banana launcher, as it was also defending me from the fisherman. Day 25 was one of the worst levels we've faced so far in this challenge, and I spent a lot of time trying to beat it. The things were actually going so bad that not even taking a lily pad could change the situation, because the third wave had defined the entire level with 5 fisherman zombies appearing on the lawn, leaving us no chance to organize a sustainable defense. However, something inside me told that this level might be possible, and I only need to try more to beat it, because I couldn't afford to lose a life at this point. The next 40 minutes were spent remembering the zombie combinations and searching for the best places to place my plans. At one point I was so close to beating it that there were only a few steps left to be done. However, I made a few mistakes, and that's why the level had to be replayed. After playing this level for over an hour, I finally managed to get all the best combinations I could, so the bunk chair was able to do the work like a pro. By the final wave, I had left with over 750 available suns to be spent, which meant that the victory was already in my pocket. Because of that, I was able to organize the defense to defeat the remaining zombies, so an hour of my life wasn't wasted anymore. On my first attempt, I decided to beat day 27 without using lily pads, but soon the game told me I shouldn't play it in that way, which is why the second attempt had already included them. With the lily pads, this wasn't a hard level at all, so I was fully enjoying the gameplay with my Egyptian plants. Day 28 used to be one of the hardest levels, not only in the big wave beach, but in the entire game. However, in 2026 it is one of the easiest levels of the second part of the big wave beach, and it's really sad to see that such an interesting and hard level was turned into an easy one. Day 29 is the second last stand level of the big wave beach, for which I prepared an unusual defense, which consisted of 2 lanes of cabbage pulls and a lane of repeaters. The first one is supposed to defeat the snorkels, and the second one had to do the main damage to the zombies. Unfortunately, by the time we reached the final wave, my defense had already collapsed and none of the lone movers were activated, which is why the level was beaten on the first attempt. Actually, I can't imagine any other way of beating this level, because the number of zombies was truly immense. As you may see, most of the levels of the big wave beach are at the brink of being beaten, but still, we succeeded no matter what. When I told you I'm not allowed to lose day 25, it was because I already knew about day 30, which usually becomes one of the few impossible levels in any challenge. I can't say I didn't try to beat it, as I spent over 20 minutes trying to do that with the plans I've got. However, defending crocodiles was even worser than defeating the potato mines, because the latter cannot be activated by the fisherman, and the same can be said about the crocodile. The farthest I've got was the third wave, and only then could I realize the full potential of this level, which brought us a lot of fishermen, gargantuars, and so on. If you find a way to beat this level on your own using only Egyptian plants, please let me know in the comments below how you did it. Alright, never mind, I confirmed that this level is impossible, and that's why I'm losing my second life. Oh yeah, this was also the final level of the Big Wave Beach, so we are moving to the modern day with only one chance for a mistake. If I lose more than one level, I lose the entire challenge, so stay with us to see the outcome. It is day 1 of the modern day, and I can say that this was the most interesting first day we have seen in this challenge, as it combined a lot of zombies from different worlds. Yet, defeating them wasn't so hard, especially since we used some tough plants like Bloomerang and Repeater. It's day 2 and the camel zombies are coming for you. It was so cool to see the camels again, as the last time we defeated them was 4000 years ago. However, the zombies from the Big Wave Beach had other plans, so they decided to invade my lawn through a time portal, which is why my defense was broken. Oh, and seeing a gargantuar on a second level is definitely a new experience for me. Day 4 contained a lot of zombies from the Neon Mixtape tour, all of which were defeated in a matter of minutes. Day 5 was the first level, which included the newspaper zombie, and I consider it one of the most dangerous enemies of the modern day. You don't see a problem while he holds a newspaper, but a second after he drops it, the old man goes insane, and there are not many options to defeat him. The best plan to deal with it is of course the potato mine, but we don't usually have enough time and place to place it, so we should rely more on Johnny. It is day 6 and it looks like we are already stuck with the first problematic level of the modern day. It isn't a typical level of this world, because here you have to gather 4000 suns, which might sound easy, but that's before you enter the first wave. I didn't expect to see so many different looking zombies from a few different worlds, especially some hard ones, including impotents, wizards and clowns. Combined with the newspaper zombie, they create an insanely effective combo for destroying your plans, so gathering suns is no longer an easy task. It is obvious that you need more than one attempt to beat it, so everything went pretty much fine on my second attempt, but I still lost a few lone movers while defeating the final wave. Day 7 contained a lot of zombies from the Big Wave Beach, but it wasn't nearly as hard as Day 6, so we are moving to the next one. Day 10 was a level that featured a ton of different zombies, including gargantuars. Honestly, I'm not a big fan of such a level, because I don't see any logic in combining the far future with the Frostbite Caves and the Jurassic Marsh. We didn't face many zombies until the second wave, when a ton of enemies came on Todd alone with the goal of eating my brain. However, the level's outcome wasn't on the side of the zombies. Day 11 was actually an easy level, and I've got nothing to say about it. On day 12 I couldn't lose more than 12 plants, which might sound easy, but do not forget which world we're playing in now and what type of zombies we face here. My first attempt had failed mainly because of the excavator zombie, which destroyed a ton of plants. However, I didn't repeat the same mistake on my second attempt, and the cabbage pult did its job much better than a repeater. Still, the level's pace was extremely fast, so it was hard to understand anything that was happening here. However, thanks to the correct use of a plant food, the level was completed, leaving me one step away from a failure. Day 15 was the final level of the first part of the modern day, where I had to defend Johnny the Primal Nut from being eaten. Considering that most of the zombies that we witnessed on that level were locals, it wasn't hard to complete the level. Well, one of the nuts was almost eaten right before the final wave, but fortunately I had a plant food, so the primal nut was turned into a primal rock, allowing us to beat the level from the very first attempt. Hey, is that a taco? I don't think so, it looks more like a trap. Oh yeah, that's a trap. Day 17 reminded me of day 1, but this time with lots of balloons. Oh, and the blue skull zombie was once again a trouble, however, not a big one. On day 10 we were blowing up a lot of balloons with the help of a repeater, so balloon zombies had no chance to fly into my house. Besides that, nothing special was happening on this level. Day 20 was a crazy day where an old man from the Wild West was combined with a young punk from the Neon Mixtape Tour. What a mix. You should also stay away from an angry grandpa, as he eats a walnut with the same speed as the regular zombie eats the sunflower. Even though my defense had totally collapsed by the final wave, I was still able to complete this level with an empty lawn and a potato mine for a newspaper. Day 21 was the first level, which included a famous all-star zombie, which I immediately stopped with either the help of a sunflower or iceberg clutches. Compared to the newspaper zombie, it is much easier to stop a football zombie, especially since I've got some cheap plans to do that. At this point, I was still trying to prepare something like a defense, but I couldn't realize that it isn't necessary in this world, because the modern day is not about strategy, but instead it's about a hardcore survival. Day 23 was just, okay, guess. This level contained a lot of zombies from the Big Wave Beach, but fortunately they couldn't change the situation in their favor. Day 24 was easily beaten as well, and I'm actually surprised that a modern day is way easier than all the worlds we've faced since the Neon Mixtape Tour. Does that mean that PVZ 2 can be beaten with only Egyptian plants? We'll see. Day 26 was a bit harder than all the previous levels, and it required a bit of skill to beat it, because the Discotron 3000 combined with the Hair Metal Gorg is a hard combo to stop. Since you don't have an opportunity to place any plans because of the music wave, it is hard to do anything with flying zombies, and this was the main problem of this level. Fortunately, when played correctly, you will have enough lone movers and suns to stop the final zombies. Yeah, you will probably finish it without any lone movers, but that doesn't change anything. On day 28 we had to gather 3000 suns, and it wasn't that easy to do that, as lots of Johnnies were sacrificed to the zombies to get the needed amount of sun. An old man was biting a poor nut without stopping. Day 29 was also an easy level dedicated to ancient Egypt, and I had a lot of fun while dealing with mummies. Something is definitely wrong with the modern day, because I was waiting here for a true hardness, and instead I've got something in between. What a shame, PopCap. However, everything that I told you was right up until we entered Day 30, which is also one of the hardest levels in the game. It contains all of the hardest zombies we faced previously, and I'm not gonna lie if I say that it is 100% impossible, not only with Egyptian plants, but with most of the bodies you can collect in this game. I spent 30 minutes understanding how tough the level is, and on my final attempt I got right before the final wave, and only then could I realize the scale of the problem we face today. There are way too many gargantuars to be defeated, and I'm sure that it is 100% impossible to be beaten with only Egyptian plants, just like Day 13 of the Neon Mixtape Tour or Day 30 of the Big Wave Beach. You got me right, I lost my final life, so now I don't have a chance for a mistake. But fortunately, Day 31 was the final level of the modern day, and it was nothing compared to Day 30, which I struggled to beat even with regular plans. Summarizing everything we faced while beating these 10 worlds, I can say that yes, Plants vs Zombies 2 is possible to beat with only the Egyptian plants, and they performed way better than I expected, because I thought that the challenge would end up somewhere around the Neon Mixtape Tour. Hand on to your parrots and peg legs, my fellow Ice Cubes, because today we're going to beat the entirety of Plants vs Zombies 2 with only the plants from the Pirate Seas. Today I've got 3 hearts, which led me to lose 3 levels. However, if I lose more than that, I have to eat a lemon on a video. What about the rest of the rules? First, I can only use plants from the Pirate Seas and the tutorial world. Second, no leveling up. Third, no power-ups. Fourth, using pre-planted plants is okay. And fifth, we're skipping the levels that force us to use other plants. Now, without further ado, we are ready to do it. Our journey began with a hot sauce and a delicious taco eaten by Crazy Dave, and that's how we appeared in ancient Egypt. So, because we had no plans for beating this world, I'll tell you a bit more about the challenge while speedrunning the first world. Like in my previous challenge, I decided to include plants from the tutorial world because they are an essential part of the piracies, and it's hard to imagine the gameplay without Sunflower, Johnny the Walnut, or Potato Mine. With that being said, we finally got the world key to the piracies, so the real challenge is beginning now. It's day 1 of the piracies and it's time to unlock the first plant of this world, which is the kernel pult. Buttering the zombies is going to be an essential mechanic for beating a lot of worlds, so getting a corn body is the #1 goal for us. Fortunately, it wasn't that hard to get it, and the first plant from the piracies is already in my crew. Day 2 was fully dedicated to the kernel pult, and I had a lot of fun while buttering the zombies, especially the seagulls. Day 3 was a full copy of day 1, which was also beaten exclusively with the kernel pult. However, that's not all, because we unlocked the Snapdragon, which is one of the best plants from the adventure mode. I couldn't miss such an opportunity, and that's why on day 4 I combined kernel pults together with Johnny and Snapdragon. This was also the first day we faced the Buckethead zombie, so the hardness is rapidly increasing. Day 5 was a day when a legendary combo made a comeback. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the duo of the cabbage pult and the kernel pult. It reminded me of the wipe of the roof level in PVZ 1, so you should give it a like. Day 6 was a full copy of day 5, with the only difference being the spikeweed, which we unlocked after completing the level. On day 7, the spikeweed has become incredibly useful, and that's all because the barrel roller zombie had already attacked my pirate ship. In addition, it was extremely enjoyable to butter the zombies while they were staying on the spikeweed. The zombies with a butter on the head have no chance to defeat me. Day 8 was a conveyor belt level, which was also beaten according to my rules, so that's why you see it included in today's challenge. This was also the first and the last time we encountered a pirate Gork, which was actually buttered 99% of the time. It's day 9 and the zombie waves are becoming bigger, so we need the plants that can easily send all the zombies right into the water. Of course, I'm talking about the sprint bean, which is actually useful in only one world, but that's just the details. On day 10, the sprint bean became my main weapon against the swashbucklers and the rest of the zombies who had the will to go through the lane of pain. Yeah, I've placed a lot of spikeweeds today. On day 11, the barrels were easily defeated by using my favorite combo of cabbage pult and the kernel pult. And as a result of a wedgie battle, we have unlocked the coconut cannon, which is the new member of my crew. 11 coconut flopas out of 10. On day 12, we had a lot of fun while shooting the seagulls with a lane of coconut cannons. I remember the time when this game was quite hard, and I struggled to beat the final wave with hundreds of seagulls. Yet, it isn't that hard today, so we are moving to the next level. No, Popka, do not try to steal my kernel pult. What a cheeky little parrot. However, a slight shot from a coconut cannon was a good lesson for the thief not to steal my plants. Day 13 was the first day we used coconuts, and I had a great time blowing up the zombie horde. Day 14 was the first last stand level of the piracies, for which I prepared a unique defense for the first time in many years. This time I decided to combine all the plants we've gathered so far, and I can say that it was the right choice because the level was finished in less than 2 minutes and none of my plants were stolen or eaten. Oh, and it looks like we unlocked the 3-peater. Day 15 was dedicated to my new pea shooter, and I even got one as a pre-planted plant. I was so happy I got a free 3-peater that I have nothing to complain about. Day 16 is an interesting day because it was beaten entirely with only the sprint bean. This level didn't contain seagulls or imp cannons, so all the zombies could be kicked out of the ship. By the final wave I had nothing to worry about because the plant for the ability of the sprint bean had done all the work by itself. On day 17 I decided to play in a lane of coconut cannons so we could finally have a fair fight with the imp cannon. By the final wave I have completed everything I wanted to, including a mega shot of the coconut cannon. That was amazing. Day 10 was included in today's challenge thanks to the pea shooter, which was my only option to beat the level. However, while writing the scripts for the video, I saw that we also had an opportunity to play with the Spikeweed and Johnny, but that's just the details. Day 19 was a copy of Day 1, and so was Day 20. It is hard to say anything new about them, so we are moving to the next one. Everything was going so fast on Day 21 that I didn't even understand when we entered the final wave. Still, all the challenges were completed, so I consider it a total victory over the zombies. Day 22 is my favorite last stand level, for which I also decided to prepare a new defense consisting of 3 Peters and kernel pults. Everything was going pretty well until we entered the final wave when the new cannons appeared and the old ones blew up with dozens of imps who then destroyed my defense by consuming all the plants. However, the same couldn't be done on my second attempt because I've planted a lawn full of spikeweed, so none of the zombies had a chance to get to my brains or lawnmowers. Even though it took me much more time to complete the level, I have been using this strategy since 2013 and it has never let me down. Day 23 was similar to Day 2 and I once again enjoyed battering the seagulls with the help of the kernel pult. It's Day 24 and it seems that I have to protect those spring beans from being eaten. Fortunately, neither seagulls nor imps had a chance to consume my green beans, and that's all because I prepared a strong defense consisting of a lane of kernel pults and a lane of 3 Peters. This level was also possible thanks to the plant feedability of the kernel pult, which saved us so many times while spring beans were sleeping. As a result of this battle, we have not only unlocked the final plant of the Pirate Seas, which is the cherry bomb, but we also got a chance to find the chicken taco in the Wild West. So we've come to the land of the outlaw zombies to find out that the chance of discovering a taco here is somewhere around defeating a gargantuar with a level 1 pea shooter. This is how everything started on Day 1 of the Wild West, and I can say that the kernel pult fits the local atmosphere amazingly well. Nothing special has happened on Day 2, except that I decided to place a lane of spring beans. Don't ask me why did I decide to do that, probably it's because I was recording that stage at 8 AM. Still, the plant feedability of it allowed me to deal with the remnants of the zombie horde after the final wave. Day 3 was remembered for 2 scenes, and one of them was battering a ton of zombies. The second one is Uncle Milo, who I don't really trust because of the boombox. Day 5 was the first level, which included the toaster zombie, and I know a good way to deal with it. First, you need to place a few kernel pults, and then you have to add a few spike rocks, so when the metal guys come onto the lawn, they are immediately buttered and then defeated by the sharp spikes of the spike rock. That's what happened with them after the first wave, and the same was repeated after the final one. It looks like they've got no chance to come to Johnny's tasty shell. Day 6 is the first last stand level, which was beaten in less than a minute. It is actually my personal record, and I recommend repeating this strategy for beating it. It seems that the plants from the Pirate Seas are a perfect solution for beating the Wild West. On Day 7 I repeated my strategy from Day 5, but this time with some more spike rocks and a lane of snapdragons. Even though the number of zombies was higher than on the previous levels, it didn't affect my gameplay, since the snapdragon is an ultimate weapon for defeating the huge horde. Whoa, it's already Day 10 and we finally face a zombie which is coming from the KFC. Ladies and gentlemen, here comes the chicken wrangler with his angry chickens. So because I prepared the series defense line by the middle of the level, those crazy chickens couldn't do anything to either walnut or snapdragon. In fact, even if I didn't place any kind of spikes, the chickens could still be fried by the snapdragon, which makes the plants from the Pirate Seas a nightmare fuel for a zombie chicken. I wasn't allowed to spend over 500 suns on Day 11, and that finally sounds like a real challenge. I do not have many available options for such a limited budget, so I found nothing better than battering the zombies. It not only stops them from reaching the lawnmowers, but also allows me to place a lane full of kernel pults, which rapidly increases my chances of survival. I would call it a perfect strategy if only a few zombies from the final wave didn't break my defense for the first time in this challenge. Still, the level was completed without any issues. Day 13 was a day full of angry bulls which attempted to break my defense by throwing a little imp inside of it. However, this isn't the most efficient way to surprise me, since the Prospector zombie did it much better at the back of the lawn. Still, what I find interesting about this level is that the coconut cannon is exceptionally useful in defeating the tough zombies, and I guess that its usability will rise even more in the upcoming worlds. There were a lot of chickens and piano music on day 14, but fortunately both the annoying music and the dangerous birds were stopped. Day 15 may remind you of day 14, but this time we had an additional restriction of losing no more than 2 plants, so I was playing really carefully to avoid losing a single one. Johnny, I see you! Don't worry buddy, we will protect you. Day 16 was a day of defending a walnut, and to avoid losing plants at the back of the lawn as we did a few levels ago, I decided to place a lane of snapdragons right in front of the Johnny, so prospectors had no chance to appear at the back of the yard. The flower lane always seems to look scary, but we have to be brave, so let's beat day 17 like there is no flower lane. This time I decided to combine a lane of 3 Peters together with snapdragons, so zombies got enough damage before coming close to my walnut. By the first wave we have already been dealing with the first bull, and 80% of my defense has already been finished. By the second wave I was defeating the zombies like a pro, so none of them had a chance to get close to my beautiful flowers. It is hard to forget about day 10 because it was a true nightmare when I played with only Egyptian plants. However, this time it was a true pleasure to beat this level, as I needed only 2 plants and a few plant foods to finish it in under 2 minutes. At this point, beating PVZ2 with only plants from the Pirate Seas seems to be much easier than the previous challenge. However, this is just the beginning and it may become way harder in the future. It's day 19 and I have to spend no more than 2000 suns to beat the level. If you think that 2000 suns is a small number, remember how we beat day 11 with only 500 suns. This number is enough to place 2 lanes of kernel pools and a few snapdragons to deal with toasters, so I had no trouble completing the level. On day 21, I was a few steps away from failing the level, but as always, luck was on my side, and an annoying grandpa didn't take a few steps closer to the flower lane. I was also deeply inspired by my victory on day 10, so I decided to repeat the same strategy on a regular day. As you may see, all the zombies were really happy because of staying on the spikes with the butter on their faces. Day 23 reminded me of some of the first levels we played in the Wild West, but with a few additional restrictions. I suggest moving to the next one because I've got nothing to say about it. Day 24 was the last day of the Wild West and I was ready to do it. Not everything was going well at the beginning of the level, since the number of zombies was high and the number of plants to defeat them was low. However, the balance has shifted in my favor by the first wave, as I had already prepared a lane of kernel pools and snapdragons, which allowed me to stop any kind of zombie right on the first tiles. I was doing so well that by the final wave, not even a lane of bulls combined with chickens could smash me. As a result of this battle, the winter melon was unlocked, and so was the portal to the frostbite caves. Welcome to the frozen waste of prehistory. In my previous challenge, this was one of the hardest worlds because of the cold wind and a lack of plant which could melt the ice. Fortunately, the same can be said about today's challenge because we've got a snapdragon, which can melt the ice and the surrounding plants. Does that sound enough to understand that day 1 was successfully completed? I think so. On day 2 the pre-planted repeaters were covered in ice, and I had an amazing opportunity to melt the ice on them and use those repeaters just like the other plants. I'm not gonna lie, it was an amazing deal for only 300 suns. It's day 4 and the hunter zombie is already on my lawn. However, because I've got a snapdragon, throwing snowballs and attempts to freeze Johnny isn't the smartest decision. By the way, the coconut cannon is a fantastic weapon against the tough zombies, so use it if it's needed. I remember how tough day 6 was with only Egyptian plants and how much my poor bloomerang suffered from the snowballs and the snowstorm. However, it's not a big problem when you combine the kernel pult with a snapdragon, especially in large numbers as we did on this level. On day 7 I wanted to change something in my strategy because repeating the same tactic on the exact same tiles can drive anyone crazy, so I decided to substitute kernel pult with a 3-peater. To my surprise, it was working pretty well, especially when the 3-peater was fed with a plant food. Oh, thank you so much for supporting the whole game, Split P. Without you, the loan would turn into a total mess. Guys, do you smell the coconuts on the lawn? Because the coconut cannon became the main character on day 9, with the role of defeating a group of zombies, especially those that consist of the dodo birds. By the final wave, only one dodo rider could escape the fate of being defeated by the coconut cannon. Day 11 is my favorite level of the Frostbite Caves, and I've been preparing for it since the beginning of the challenge. It was extremely hard to complete this level with only Egyptian plants, and I spent over an hour in countless attempts to beat it. However, after analyzing my previous experience, I decided to exclude any experiments, which is why you can witness only a Snapdragon with a walnut on my lawn. Of course, the plant food ability of Snapdragon played a key role in defeating the huge zombie flocks. I was standing so well that by the final wave, the hunter zombie could only senselessly throw the snowballs at Johnny. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the Frostbite Caves, for which I prepared a unique defense strategy combining Snapdragon with a coconut cannon. I've never beaten this level like that, so it was a new experience for me, and I can say that I fully enjoyed it because of the coconut cannon's plant food ability. It leaves no chance for the zombie clocks to get close to my Snapdragons, and the final shot that I made after the big wave was fantastically good. I gave it 11 coconuts out of 10. You all know that the flower lanes scared me a lot. However, not this time, because we're playing in the Frostbite Caves with only the plants from the Pirate Seas, and they are a perfect solution for this world. In addition, this was probably the first time in almost 12 years that I buttered an ice cube. I've never seen this kind of zombie with a slice of butter on the head, and I confirm that it looks kinda funny. Not even the Sloth Gargantuar from the final wave could change the situation, because the Spike Rock was defeating it like a pro. This is how I spent day 13, and it was one of the best levels of this challenge. On day 15 I had to protect a pepper pult placed on the banana cell, and I would say it was kinda easy considering we've got a fire and butter machine, which is one of the best combos in the Frostbite Caves. It is so interesting to compare this challenge with the previous one, because the plants from the Pirate Seas are classical plants, just like Egyptian ones, but they performed way better so far. I couldn't miss an opportunity to add some new plants to our time adventures, so melting the ice in the pre-planted plants on day 17 was my #1 goal for this level. Once again, everything went so smoothly that I've got nothing to complain about. Well, take a look at this, a dodo bird with a butter on his face. That's the best description of day 19, because the rest of the level was just an enjoyable plant spam. Day 20 was all about fire and melting the ice, especially since the frozen imp was pushed right onto the lawn. However, with a step-by-step colonization of the lawn with my fellow Snapdragon, it wasn't so tough to melt a ton of ice. Day 22 reminded me of the good old days of the Wild West, because the whistles were pushing the lawn just like the chickens did in the 1850s. And just when I melt the ice in my fellow crocodiles, those damn whistles have activated 2 of them, leaving me no chance to enjoy the level with an avocado crocodile. This is why life is truly unfair. Yet, the rest of the level went pretty fine, as multiple Snapdragons and kernel pulls were defeating the zombies like a pro. Day 23 may remind you of day 11, and that's a bit true, because the positioning is almost the same, and the only 2 differences between them are the number of zombies and the requirement of defending the short guard. The only thing you have to do to beat this level is to place as many Snapdragons as possible, so the short guard wouldn't be activated or eaten by zombies. On day 24 I had to gather 2500 suns, and the level was beaten using the same strategy as on day 23, so we are moving to the next one. What defines the late stage of the Frostbite Caves is an active spam of snapdragons. On day 26 I had a pretty good sun production, which also included sunshrooms, and that all allowed me to have over 3 lanes of snapdragons just by the second wave. By the third wave I decided to expand my snapdragons further into the lawn, so the zombies wouldn't group in huge flocks. In addition, one of the most useful plants at the late stage of the Frostbite Caves is of course the cherry bomb. Don't mess around with an exploding cherry unless you want to finish it like those prehistoric zombies. If you thought that I told you enough about the snapdragons, then the final level of the Frostbite Caves is going to become a whole new story. So the main goal of this level is to defend those rotabagas from being eaten by zombies. Sounds simple, but only the theory. In reality, I had to expand my snapdragon spam right to the 7th lane, so zombies couldn't make more than a few steps onto the lawn. The only zombies that has shifted the balance to the other side was of course the Sloth Gargantuar with its numerous imps. Yet, not even 3 of them could get close to the Rotabaga, which means that the Frostbite Caves have been successfully completed, and we are now moving to discover the vanished City of Gold. The number one reason to love the Lost City is of course the huge number of sun that you can get without placing sunflowers. I invented the tradition of beating day 1 of the Lost City without having any sunflowers on the lawn, so all the plants you see on the screen were placed thanks to the sun tiles. By the end of the level I had 3 lanes of kernel pults and over 1000 suns in the pocket, which tell us a lot about the City of Gold. On day 2 I got some additional sun by digging up a few red stingers, which allowed me to place my first 3 Peters so early. It wasn't a hard level at all, but I should really be careful with placing my plants because the parachute rain had already become a big trouble. Yet I was still happy to have placed so many 3 Peters. Day 4 was a level full of butter and golden shovels. Unfortunately, I don't have so many plants that can deal with the excavator zombie, so the kernel pult is going to be my main body for the last of the Lost City. Yet we shouldn't underestimate the snapdragon, which also played a role in defeating the zombie horde. On day 6 I decided to test the coconut cannon in the new realities, and I can say that this is one of the best plans that you can use in the Lost City because the zombie flocks are immense and the coconut shots damages the zombies in a 3x3 area, so this mechanic is crucial for defeating the shovel zombie on the surrounding lanes. I was playing the Lost City at around 11 PM, so don't blame me for using the sprint bean. I was still trying to find a usage for it, except for the piracies, but unfortunately the sprint bean is only useful in its home world. The rest of the day 7 went coconutly well because the coconut cannon was defeating the zombies without stopping. There is nothing much to say about day 10, so I suggest moving on to the next level. Day 11 was full of delicious corn, which all the zombies got right away. Day 12 was all about a serious sun production, as we had to make 5000 suns in just 3 waves. Fortunately, the zombie spam wasn't that bad, and the first Gargantuar had appeared only in the middle of the level. I was so lucky to gather 5000 suns before the Lost City imp was defeated, as I wasn't paying attention to the number of suns ahead. Yet, the level was beaten and no one could stop us. On day 15 we had to defend a few egg keys from being eaten or replaced. It was done so easily that I actually forgot about the main goal of this level because I was only thinking about the smell of the coconuts in the morning. I don't think that those imps have good intentions, especially since they wear backpacks. Day 17 was the first day on which I had to solve the problem of backpacks, and I can say that beating the Lost City with only plants from the piracies is much harder than completing it with only Egyptian ones. Still, I expected to see more zombies on the final wave, but it is what it is. Day 19 was the first day with 9 gigantic bugs, and what I discovered while beating the level is that the biggest fear of the bugs is a slice of butter produced by the kernel pult. It is by far the most effective weapon for defeating the horrible insect, so I recommend using the kernel pult for dealing with locals. I can't say that day 20 wasn't a hard one, but it would definitely be way harder without the cherry bomb and the coconut cannon. Day 23 was the first problematic day of the Lost City, as everything started to go wrong right from the beginning. The first wave came almost immediately, and I didn't even place all the sunflowers, so my defense wasn't ready for the invasion of a Gargantuar. However, that's not all, because Indiana Jones was eating my kernel pulse like a fresh strawberry. The only plant that saved me in such a horrible situation was the cherry bomb, and I can't even describe how glad I am that I've got it today. A bit later, the situation was stabilized, but even the coconut shots didn't prevent a lose of a few lawn mowers. Day 24 was a day with a flower lane, and it already sounds scary. However, things are never as bad as they seem, and my beloved coconut cannon was cooking this level. Also, I accidentally clicked on the Zap power-up while trying to collect a coin, but fortunately it didn't affect the gameplay, so we are moving on to the next level. It's day 25, and it seems that the coconut cannon was combined with the kernel pult. It is an effective combo, and I'm sure we will use it in the upcoming worlds. Day 26 was all about a massive zombie spam, but that wasn't a problem for a Snapdragon. If the Egyptian challenge wasn't possible without the bang chai, then the pirate one is unimaginable without the Snapdragon, as this is a key plant for defeating the zombie horde. Day 27 was the first time we met the Blue Skull zombie, and I can say that the coconut cannon is exceptionally useful for dealing with an old man from the Lost City. Still, we have to gather a lot of sun to plant a lane of coconuts, so sun production is essential for beating the levels. Day 29 contained all kinds of zombies from the Lost City, but even that couldn't stop us from beating the level on the first attempt. Even though the level itself is really hard and the number of zombies after the second wave is impressive, we managed to hold on by combining all the plants together. It allowed us to survive the final wave and save as many as 4 out of 5 lawn mowers, which is an impressive result. Day 30 is one of the strangest levels of the Lost City, and I usually lose a lot of lawn mowers while trying to beat it. However, this time everything didn't go as I expected, and by using the cherry bomb together with coconut cannon, I've solved 95% of the problems, including Indiana Jones and the Blue Skull zombie. This was the final level of the Lost City, and still no taco. Maybe we should better search for it in the future? In the far future? If we stop the terror from tomorrow, then I guess that the taco is gonna be ours. It is day 1 of the far future, and I decided to have a lot of fun by playing this level with only 3 Peters, as we don't usually use pea shooters in this challenge. Day 2 introduced us to the shield zombie, which is also scared of the butter. Even though it's a robo-zombie, the butter is still a universal way of defeating it. Nothing special was happening on day 3, so we are moving to the next one. It's day 4, and I had to survive the zombie attack with the falling sun bombs. It was so satisfying to activate the power tiles with a 3-Peter, so nobody had a chance to stand against the Rain of Peace. Day 5 was the first day with the Robo Conehead, and it's a tough enemy for a coconut cannon. It requires around 3 shots to defeat a single robot, which is a big number, since the reloading speed of the coconut cannon isn't one of the fastest. I guess we need to search for another way to defeat those zombies. Day 6 was beaten with only classical plants, and I'm proud that my boy Pea Shooter managed to hold off a zombie attack on itself. Day 7 contained a ton of jetpack zombies, but fortunately we've got a kernel pull to defeat them. What about the rest of the enemies? Well, they were smelling the coconuts. On day 9 we had to survive the zombie attack with a limited number of plants. However, I don't usually place so many plants in the lane, so it had no impact on my gameplay. Even though we faced a few Discotrons on day 10, I can't say that this level was that hard to complete. Compared to the Lost City or the Frostbite Caves, it is much easier to complete the Far Future, which is similar to the Wild West in terms of hardness. Day 11 was the first last stand level of the Far Future, and I can say that picking the coconut cannon with a walnut was an amazing decision. It not only stopped the zombies as soon as they entered the lane, but also allowed us to finish the level without losing any lone movers. Day 12 consisted of 2 waves and 2 gargantuars, which is a key difference from the Wild West. The latter one had no gargantuars except for the ultimate battle, and the Far Future has a few levels with dangerous robots. Still, the plant for the ability of the coconut cannon is tougher than a gargantuar, so they can forget about eating my brains. Day 13 was the first day we met the Mecha Football Zombie, and it is undoubtedly one of the most dangerous enemies of the far future. Yet, when played with the right plans, it doesn't pose much of a threat to you, as you either blow it up or get stuck in the butter. Day 14 had to be played with a limited number of suns, so that's why you see the mix of corn and cabbage in the yard. Day 15 was about protecting delicious citrons, and it seems that the Crazy Dave has no clue about planting oranges, because instead of placing them at the back of the lawn, he decided to sacrifice them to the zombies. Even though I don't have an orange guy in my crew, I decided to substitute it with a coconut, and it was a good decision, as my defense was working really well. On day 18 we had a goal of gathering 6000 suns, and the only interesting thing about this level is that I placed 2 lanes of coconuts, which allowed me not to care about any type of enemies you see on the screen. It's day 19 and it looks like the sun bombs are once again falling from the sky, so I have to survive a massive zombie attack without placing sunflowers. Of course, beating this level like a normal one would be too easy for me, so I decided to butter everything up with the help of the kernel pult. At first we were doing pretty fine, and even a robo conehead couldn't stand against an enormous butter spam, but then everything went wrong because of the Discotron 3000 and his metal body in the face of the RoboGarg. Yet I also had a solution to this problem, the cherry bomb. It not only saved the existing defense, but also prevented me from losing the lawnmowers on that level. Day 20 was all about protecting starfruits, which I believe is a cool plant with a big potential. Thanks to the numerous coconut shots, cherry bombs, and especially Johnny the Walnut, I completed the level without any issues, and that's why you should start to believe in the supremacy of coconuts. Day 21 was a day when I placed a ton of coconut cannons. The main goal of this level was to gather 5000 suns with a limited number of plants, and the best way to do that is of course to begin with the cheap plants like the kernel pult, and then step by step substitute it with the coconut cannon. By the end of the level I had as many as 8 of them, so the futuristic zombies had no chance to stop me. Day 22 was the second last stand level of the far future, so I began thinking about a new strategy to beat it, since the 3-peater isn't available today. The strategy I came up with was an interesting one, because I've never seen anyone beating this level with only the coconut cannon. If only the futuristic gargantuar hadn't melted my coconuts, I would have finished it way better than I did. Day 23 repeats one of the first levels of the far future, but with additional content, so I suggest moving on to the final level. Day 24 was all about the sun bombs, and I didn't want to repeat a past mistake, so I decided to replace the kernel pult with the 3-peater, which is way more effective against the tough buddies. In addition, the 3-peater's plant food ability is an absolute banger that has saved us so many times from being eaten or kicked out. So the terror from tomorrow is defeated, which means that now we have to defeat the terror of the past in the face of the dark ages. Night 1 doesn't bring us much fun because the sun is no longer falling from the sky, meaning its production has rapidly decreased, and we have to find an optimal and cheap way to defeat the horde. It's hard to say that everything went fine because we felt the lack of sun throughout the level, and that's just the beginning of the mess. On night 2, I decided that the best possible way to beat the dark ages is to build an impenetrable fortress at the back of the lawn, so everyone is protected by Johnny and the Snapdragon defeats the enemies. Sounds good, right? Well, that's before we see the wizard. It's night 3 and my favorite combination of kernel pult and cabbage pult sounds like a good way to help the Snapdragon deal with bucketheads. If only we had more sun, the level would look way different, but it is what it is. Night 5 was the first night featuring a Jester zombie. Even though it's a dangerous enemy, most plants of the Pirate Seas are capable of stopping it. The combination of Johnny, Spikeweed and the Snapdragon is the nightmare fuel for the Jester zombie. It feels so good not to care about the clown. Night 6 was the first Lost Stand level of the Dark Ages, and I found nothing better than preparing a defense consisting of Johnny and Snapdragon. Everything was going so well that none of the Snapdragons or Walnut were eaten. Night 7 was all about the Night Zombie, which isn't a tough enemy without a Zombie King. Here we use the same strategy as we did before, so I've got nothing to add here. On night 9 we had to survive the zombie attack supported by evil potions. Once again the Snapdragon is the only solution for the Dark Ages, so nothing special was happening here. On night 11 the situation has shifted a bit as we were introduced to the Wizard Zombie. It is by far one of the most dangerous enemies we've faced so far, so we have to be real careful when this zombie enters the lane. Fortunately, I've got a cherry bomb and the plant for the ability of the Snapdragon, which are my key plans for dealing with wizards. Night 12 was all about protecting the puff shrooms from being eaten or disappearing. To my surprise, those little bodies were exceptionally useful when the zombies came close to the walnut, so the position in the diemate was one of the best. If you thought I would use any plants besides Johnny and Snapdragon, no, not today. Night 15 was the second last stand level of the Dark Ages, and it was possible only because of the plant food ability of the Snapdragon, which saves us so many times from turning plants into sheep. Yet there were still too many wizards to be countered, so the remaining work was done by the lone movers. Night 16 was the one I was waiting for most, as it defines the late stage of the Dark Ages. If this level is possible, then we will beat the Middle Ages with all the lives. However, if we don't, then I'm going to be one step closer to eating a lemon. My main tip for anyone who decides to beat this level in an unusual way is to get as many suns as possible before you reach the first wave, because later you will have no time and opportunity to do that. If you take a look at my lane before the final wave, you will see that I'm not doing well and the situation is one step away from failure. Yet, thanks to the right timings and the correct usage of a plant food, the level was beaten on the first attempt and I was so happy to do it. Night 17 was a level with evil potions and I wasn't worried about beating it. When you've got 2 lanes of Snapdragons and a lane of walnuts, only a few zombies can scare me, and none of them are seen in the Dark Ages. This was also one of the few levels where the sun deficit didn't feel much, so it was even possible to place a few coconut cannons, which were exceptionally useful for defeating the knights. Night 19 was the final level of the Dark Ages where I had to save a few magnet shrooms from being eaten by zombies. As on the previous level, the Snapdragon's goal was to fry a barbecue, but this time with lots of metal objects. It was a true pleasure to defend the magnet shroom because the little magnet was helping me a lot to deal with locals, so the King Zombie had no chance to build an army of metal helmets. Not even the Dark Ages Gargantuar could pose a threat to my defense, which means that this world is successfully completed and now it's time to deal with the mess in the 1980s. Day 1 is all about having fun, so let's enjoy the present moment. I haven't used the 3-peter in a while, so I decided to add it to the first level of the Neon Mixtape Tour. I'm not gonna lie, it's a perfect solution for stopping the fast zombies. 11 chicken floppas out of 10. It's day 2 and I'm once again battering the lone because the punk zombie has already become my headache. However, the power of the kernel pult is not enough to deal with an immense horde, so placing a few coconut cannons felt like a breath of a fresh air. Take a look at that, my boy 3-peter is used again. I guess that explains why life is truly wonderful. Day 4 was all about placing this type of pea shooter, which I like a lot for damaging the zombies in the nearby lanes. We have already been facing a ton of bucketheads by the second wave, but I couldn't imagine that I would lose the entire lane because of them. It is only day 4 and I'm already impressed by the 1980s. Day 5 is the day when I need to defend the fat beat against everything the local zombies can potentially make. Guess what? My first attempt had obviously failed because of the 2 things. The first one is the fat beat itself, as it is one of the worst plants of the adventure mode, and the second one is the kernel pult, which wasn't producing enough butter to stop the punk zombie. Yet the same can be said about my second attempt, as the plant for the ability of Snapdragon was once again saving me from a total collapse. If only day 5 is already that hard, I can't imagine what is waiting next. Do I have to say that beating day 7 is a miracle? Well, let's start from the beginning. The first mistake that I made was deciding to use only kernel pults because I thought they would be the best weapon against the glitter zombie. We were actually doing so badly because of that, so I left with almost nothing by the final wave. However, this time the luck was on my side, so the level was completed despite all the bugs, and only because I had a cherry bomb with a potato mine. Am I impressed because of that? Yeah, I think so. I have counted all the mistakes that I made on the previous levels, so day 8 of the Neon Mixtape Tour was the first level that was beaten in the right way. I didn't expect that adding a few lanes of Snapdragons would totally change the gameplay, but it is what it is. I decided to show you day 9 because it included Pea Shooter, which is a part of today's challenge. The main goal for this level is not to beat it, but instead to gather the needed amount of sun and save as many sunflowers as possible. Even though I failed my first attempt, the same can be said about the second one. That feels like a true victory. It's day 11 and I have to survive the zombie attack with the given plans. Fortunately, most of them are a part of today's challenge, so I had a lot of fun while placing a square of 3 pillars surrounded by a square of sunflowers. Day 12 was the first level that featured the hair metal Garg, which also has the best musical theme in the Neon Mixtape Tour. Yet, because I had enough suns in the plant foods, the big guy was defeated in a matter of seconds. Day 13 is the first last stand level of the Neon Mixtape Tour, and it was my biggest concern of the entire challenge. In my previous challenge dedicated to Egyptian plants, I tried numerous strategies to beat that level. However, none of them succeeded because this level is a true nightmare and it's only possible with a few plants from the adventure mode. I couldn't lose it this time, so I decided to try everything I could only imagine. On the first attempt, I placed a lane of coconut cannons, and they did so well that I survived to the final wave and defeated some zombies with cherry bombs and potato mines. However, this wasn't enough to beat it, so I decided to try again. The second attempt didn't go as well as the first one, which made me realize that I need to change my strategy. The third attempt was my last hope, because if that didn't work, I would have to skip this level and lose my first life. This time we had 2 lanes of Snapdragons and 4 lanes of potato mines. Even though Snapdragons were collapsing by the first wave, they did their job of defeating the first zombies, so my last and the only hope was cherry bombs, potato mines and walnuts. Thanks to the correct timing of activating the lawnmowers, the final wave had already begun even before I lost everything I had. This was the checkpoint for this level because it allowed me to gather enough suns to beat it right on the button. Oh no, fat beat. Again. Alright, never mind. Day 15 was the best day for a fat beat because I had to defend it once again, and you know that I don't really like defending the fat beat. Even though I had only 1 lane of Snapdragons, this was more than enough to complete the level and forget about the fat beat and its existence. Day 17 was one of the easiest days we've faced in the Neon Mixtape Tour, and I've got nothing to tell you about beating it. And the same goes for day 18, which was nothing compared to the horrible levels we faced a few minutes ago. On day 20 we were blowing everything up with the help of the coconut cannon, so stay away from my plants if you don't want to get your personal portion of coconuts. Day 21 was a day with a flower lane, and you might say that there is nothing to worry about. However, do not forget which world we're playing in now and how many zombies can easily cross the lane without asking permission to do that. If I counted how many times the zombies were staying one step away from crossing the flower lane, I would already be a billionaire, because the fact that I beat it on the first attempt and mainly with kernel pulls sounds like a miracle. But if you take a look at my plant list, you will understand that there are no secrets for beating it, because the cherry bomb and potato mine were doing all the hard work to make this level possible to be beaten. Day 23 was the first level with the arcade machines, so we are welcoming the pixel zombies. Unfortunately, there are not so many cheap ways to stop the pixel bodies, so the coconut cannon with the cherry bomb is my last hope. Well, at least we found a working solution for the new problem. Day 24 is the second last stand level of this world, and it's a new chance to try out my coconut strategy. If you thought I would struggle here as I did on the first level, then you don't really know anything about the Neon Mixtape Tour. This time the coconut cannon was standing strong, and we had enough plant foods to counter all the zombies, except for a hair metal Garg which appeared after the final wave. Still, the lawnmowers had finished the process, so the level was successfully completed in less than 3 minutes. Day 25 contains a ton of arcade machines, which are now destroyed with the help of the Snapdragon, whose fire damage is an ultimate weapon against the pixels. Put a like on this video if you like the pixel zombies and arcade machines, because I really do. Day 26 was all about protecting my favorite spore shrooms. Why do I like them so much? Well, that's because I love duplicating plants, especially those that I get for free. Also, the punk zombies played a key role in defending the spore shrooms, as he was the one who placed them at the back of the lawn. Don't worry, I didn't hypnotize the punk zombie, it is just a friendly fire. With lots of corns, butter, fire and coconut shots, the zombies had no chance to get to the sports room, so the level was successfully completed. Day 28 was a peak day for the boombox zombie, which attempted to break my defense using the power of music. However, not even a good melody was enough to stop my plans from defending the lawn, so with some light casualties, the level was completed and I was happy like a cappy about that. Day 29 reminded me of the previous level, but with the faster pace and a heavier zombie spam. Fortunately, not even the metal theme of the final wave was a reason to lose the level, so I felt like a true champ while defeating a Gork and listening to an epic melody. 13 metal flopas out of 10. Day 30 was the final level of the Neon Mixtape Tour, and I've got nothing to say about it. Even though the level was hard, we didn't face any unusual hardness, well except for the appearance of a few hair metal Gorks, but that's just the details. Besides that, I'd like to say that the Neon Mixtape Tour was a fantastic world with numerous challenging levels, including Day 13. Yet none of the local levels were lost, which means that we're moving to the Jurassic Marsh with all 3 hearts in our pockets. So the time has come to deal with dinosaurs, and I'm not really happy about that because I know what is waiting for me in the Jurassic Marsh. Yet it is only day 1, so let us have some fun on the only level without the dinosaurs. It's day 2 and I'm not glad to see you, Raptor. So previously my main plans were at the back of the lawn, while the front was protected by Sunflowers and Johnny. Yet this strategy seems to not work anymore, because the blue raptor doesn't care about any of my plans, so that's why we have to search for a new way of building the defense. Fortunately, there were not so many zombies in the level, so beating them was quite easy. However, day 4 of the Jurassic Marsh was a perfect day, and it's all because of the coconut cannon. A minute ago I was complaining about the way we have to play now, but today I turned all the new rules into my advantages, so the coconut cannon was blowing up the strategy of the dinosaurs like a fresh portion of zombies in the pirate seas. Nothing new has occurred on day 5, so I suggest moving on to the next level. It's day 6 and a lot of primal imps were invading my lawn thanks to the newly introduced Stegosaurus. Fortunately, this is one of the least dangerous dinosaurs of the Jurassic Marsh, so we have nothing to worry about. Day 8 was all about bada booming the zombies, and I guess they were really happy about getting their own portion of cherries with a coconut smell. A minute ago, everything was going fantastically well, and now we are in a big trouble because the flying lizard is already a big thing on day 10. By the second wave, the lawn had already begun to collapse, shifting us into a state known as collapse. However, because of the good timing for activating the lawn movers, most of the zombies were cleared without my plans or me, and I had only to deal with a few remaining on the lawn. This level was really close to being almost impossible, but we still succeeded. On day 11, I decided to fix the pterodactyl problem by placing my snapdragons right in front of the dinosaurs, so zombies couldn't take a few steps further into the lawn. Guess what? The snapdragon was doing so well that the level ended up with all the lawn movers in their places. Usually day 12 is a really tough day because you can't lose over 6 plants, and do not forget that we're playing in a world that is all about eating your plants. However, thanks to an early activation of the lawn mower and a lane of coconut cannons, the level was completed and a primal Gork had nothing to do with the butter on the face. Day 13 was a hard day in the Jurassic Marsh, just like the all previous ones. Look, it's a primal Johnny. Don't worry buddy, we will protect you. On day 15 I decided to turn a primal Johnny into a rock, because why not? Despite all the bots and a few dinosaurs that we witnessed throughout the level, nothing unusual had happened while we were defending the Rocket Johnnies, so the first part of the Jurassic Marsh is officially completed. Day 17 is by far one of the easiest days of the Jurassic Marsh. Yet, I'm not complaining about that, I'm just telling things like they really are. Day 18 was equally hard as day 17, and the only difference between them is the appearance of the T-Rex. It made me lose a lawn mower at the end of the level, so we should be really careful when dealing with the T-Rex. Day 20 was all about gathering the needed amount of sun, which is a really strange obstacle for a late game. It's day 21 and it seems that the Jurassic Marsh has finally entered the era of turning Plants vs Zombies 2 into a survival game about holding the dino attacks. Even though the situation on the loan may look catastrophic, it doesn't mean that everything is that bad, because I still have a potato mine and the cherry bomb to deal with a big horde. I actually thought that this world would be one of the hardest, but it turns out that the Jurassic Marsh is pretty much okay. Day 22 was the first last end level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I can state that beating it by placing a minefield together with a lane of coconuts is pretty easy, so go ahead and try it on your own, because this is one of the best possible ways you can beat that level. I was feeling deja vu while beating day 23 because it was pretty much the same as all the previous levels we faced in the second part of the Jurassic Marsh, so let's move on to the next one. Day 24 was a complete copy of day 23, but without the primal potato mine and the primal imps. It's day 25 and the way we beat the Jurassic Marsh has drastically changed. It seems that now we are in a big trouble because this is the first level featuring the Ankylosaurus, which leaves me no chance to prepare a serious defense. Take a look at my loan after the first wave and tell me that everything is going fine. By the second wave I was left with no plants in the loan, so you might think that I failed it. However, I didn't. Even though everything was going that bad, I still had a potato mine, cherry bomb and Johnny the Walnut, which are the key plants for beating the levels with Ankylosaurus. Despite all the bugs and the loan with no plants, the level was completed and I rated it at 14 primal flopas out of 10. Even though day 26 was hard as hell, I already knew how to deal with different dinos, so it was hard to stop me, even with only 2 lanes of plants. By the final wave, I was left without anything except for a hope of beating the level. Fortunately, I had enough salmon sounds for placing a potato mine, so the level was successfully completed. Day 27 was the second last end level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I found nothing better than copying my defense right from the first one. And guess what? I was left with all the lawnmowers and lots of potato mines, making the Jurassic Marsh one of the easiest worlds for the last end levels. Day 28 was a day when everything went as I planned because my defense finally held off the attack from prehistoric zombies, which made me so proud of Johnny and Snapdragon. Together they created an unstoppable combo which not even Ankylosaurus could break. That's what I call a true success. Day 30 was the final level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I'd like to say that it wasn't that hard as you might expect, because there was no Ankylosaurus and the number of zombies wasn't big enough to collapse the loan right after the first few waves. So because of the Primal Garg, the upper lane was lost right before the final wave, but fortunately there were not many zombies coming after it, which means that the Jurassic Marsh is successfully completed and we're now moving to the warm waters of the 1960s, also known as the Big Wave Beach. Day 1 is always about having fun, and the Big Wave Beach was no exception. I haven't used my body 3-peater for a while, so I decided to include it on the first day of a new adventure. I never used lily pads at that level, however, the rest of the Big Wave Beach will include them, since the lily pad is a crucial plant for beating that stage. Day 2 had already included 3 waves, which is an impressive number, but it is still just the beginning of the Big Wave Beach, so everything went as I expected. Day 4 was all about fire and corn, but unfortunately there was no popcorn on the loan. However, it included a lot of beach zombies with buckets on their heads, so we shouldn't underestimate the big wave. Day 6 was the first day with a snorkel zombie, and that's why you see the cabbage pult on the loan. It played a key role in defeating the snorkels in my previous challenge because it was the only catapult we had. In addition, we haven't played with the cabbage pult for a while, so it was a great opportunity to do it again. What about the final wave? Well, it was beaten thanks to the coconut cannon because my main plants weren't doing that great against the big horde. Day 7 was the first day without a safe space for the plants, so the lily pad is essential to beating it. In addition, the coconut cannon was once again doing a great job of defeating the beach zombies, so we had nothing to worry about. Even though Crazy Dave placed some funny beans at the back of the loan on day 9, it didn't affect the gameplay, so I suggest moving on to the next level. Day 11 was the first day featuring the Surfer Zombie, and I wasn't scared of it because when the Snapdragon is combined with the Kernel Pult, it only has a 5% of reaching the coast, which is when this zombie becomes dangerous. However, when it stays in the water, it is weaker than a snorkel, so do not underestimate the appearance of that enemy. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the big wave beach, and I was really lucky to beat it because there are not so many good options to do that. My main goal here was to hold on to the final wave, and I won't lie if I say that it was extremely hard, and I was really lucky that I managed to do so. As a conclusion to this level, I would like to say that the big wave beach, just like the many other worlds, is unimaginable without the cherry bomb, which is a true hero of this campaign. Day 13 was a level with a few easily beatable restrictions, and as always, it was completed by combining the coconut cannon with the kernel pult. I actually thought that day 15 would be a hard one because we had to protect a lane of potato mines from activation. So why was it so easy to beat this level? Right, because there were no Squidwards, fishermen, or any other kind of a horrible mess of the big wave beach, so only a few zombies could pose a threat to us. Yet all of them were deactivated by Snapdragon and Kernel Pult, so the potato mines can sleep well. Listen, I've got an answer to the octopuses, which is the coconut cannon. I was ready to beat day 17 like a pro because I had such a powerful weapon in my pocket. Octoman forgot that this game is played by both of us, so he should stay away from my lily pads. Day 19 has repeated day 17, but this time I was forced to play with some pre-picked plans for me, but even they couldn't stop me from blowing up the zombies with the help of the coconut cannon. I needed only a few more days to make zombies fear the smell of a fresh coconut. Day 20 has finally featured a Coral Garg, and I can say that beating it with the cherry bomb and the coconut cannon wasn't that hard. Day 22 was the first level with a fisherman zombie, and what I can be sure of is that this guy is a true nightmare fuel because we've got only a few options to destroy it and none of them are cheap. You either blow it up with a cherry bomb or a coconut shot, because the kernel pult isn't doing that great against the fisherman as he has the same amount of HP as a buckethead. Fortunately, it is only the first level that includes it, so there were not so many of them. Finally, bananas! I see you! Don't worry buddies, we will protect you. Day 23 was one of the easiest levels of the big wave beach, and I guess you understand why. For those who didn't, I'll just say that the banana launchers were efficiently protecting me from all kinds of zombies you see on the screen. Well, at that point I was one step away from failure, but fortunately I had a plant food to fix that problem. Day 25 is by far the hardest level of this challenge, and soon you'll understand why. At first, it might seem an easy level with a few light restrictions, but that's only before you try to beat it. In my first attempt, I was doing pretty fine, and I could even potentially beat this level on the very first attempt, but I didn't take a potato mine, which was a big mistake, because I didn't have enough suns to defeat the Coral Garg at the end of the level. On my second attempt, I was also one step away from beating it, but once again, I didn't take a potato mine, so my little kernel pult had no chance to stand against the conehead, which was right close to it. My third attempt was a total mess, so I'm not even mentioning it. The fourth attempt was successful, but I didn't complete one of the restrictions, so we had to begin everything from scratch. The fifth and the sixth attempts were a total mess, so I had to try again. Finally, on my seventh attempt, after 40 minutes of failure, I managed to complete this horrible level, and I even left with a good amount of suns to be spent. The main secret of this attempt is the correct use of the cherry bombs, which were placed both naturally and with the help of the plant food, which is an essential part of beating it. Honestly, I couldn't imagine getting so far without losing a single life, so the plants from the Pirate Seas are truly useful. 11 cherry flopas out of 10. Despite blocking me from choosing the major part of plants on day 27, it was still nothing compared to day 25. I felt so cool after beating such a hard level, so I decided to fully dedicate this one to the kernel pult, which I like a lot. Today the luck was on my side because take a look at this situation with a surfer zombie. If only he had taken a few steps further onto the lawn, I would have had to repeat this level from scratch, but fortunately my favorite cherry bomb saved the situation and my mood. I mentioned this many times before in my previous challenge, but I still have to repeat that. Day 28 used to be one of the most challenging levels in the entire game, but in 2026 it is by far one of the easiest days of the Big Wave Beach. Even though we were one step away from failing it, I won't stop repeating the classical conclusion for that level. Day 29 was the last stand level for which I once again prepared coconuts. Unfortunately, there isn't much to say about it, except that this level was pretty easy and I beat it in only 2 minutes. Here comes my lovely Day 30, which is by far the hardest level of the Big Wave Beach. I didn't have many expectations for it, probably because I knew how hard this level is. I gave it only one attempt to make sure that it is 100% impossible to beat with only the plants from the Pirate Seas. Guess what? I almost did it to the third wave, which is a pretty good result. For example, here's my attempt with all the plants from the PVZ 2, and you can actually see that it isn't that easy to complete this level, even with all of the best plants from the adventure mode. Well, I'm actually surprised that I made it so far before losing my first heart, because I thought I would do that in the Neon Mixtape Tour or the Jurassic Marsh. So, with that being said, the Big Wave Beach is officially completed, and now it's time to get my Teku back in the modern day. Day 1 of the modern day does not seem to be fun, because the zombie flocks are already too big to make a fun out of them. However, it didn't stop me from using a 3-peater because someone has to deal with the zombies from different worlds. In addition, my lawn was looking like a total mess, but that's just the unnecessary details. It's day 2 and it seems that we made a comeback to ancient Egypt because the camel zombies were truly dominating the lawn. However, that's not all, because their bodies from the Big Wave Beach also decided to appear on this level, but I was lucky enough to stop them without losing a single lawnmower. On day 4 we see the outdated zombies from the Neon Mixtape Tour, and I don't really know where they had been hiding for over 30 years before finally appearing on my lawn. Anyway, it is by far the easiest day of the modern day, and it's all because of the coconut cannon. Day 5 was the first level introducing us to the newspaper zombie. It is hard to say anything new about this guy, because the potato mine and the cherry bomb had given the right answer to his question. On day 6 we had to gather 4000 suns despite the appearance of a ton of annoying zombies on that level. Even though the wizard zombie was trying to break my defense by turning snapdragons into sheep, it didn't stop us from getting the circumstances in which I easily gathered a needed amount of sun in a matter of minutes. Day 7 is by far the hardest day of the modern day, and it's all because of the Squidwards and Clowns. Together they create a serious combo that only a few plants can stop, so we had to be really careful when placing the plants. Yet the Snapdragon's plant food ability has saved us from a total collapse, and I was happy like a cappy about that. Nothing special has happened on day 10, well, except that we saw a few gargantuars from different epochs, and that's all. Day 11 was a level of annoying piano music, so I couldn't even enjoy the melody of the modern day. At first, I thought that day 12 was almost impossible because the first time I beat it, I lost a lot of plants, which worried me a bit. However, on my second attempt, I decided to move all the plants closer to the lawnmowers, which became a key factor in beating the level. Look, it's a Primal Johnny in the modern day. Don't worry buddy, I won't let them make a single bite of you. Day 15 was supposed to be a hard level where Johnny had to be protected from a ton of zombies, but in reality we were fighting Indiana Jones combined with an imp cannon. Not even a gargantuar on the final wave could surprise me, so the level was successfully completed and we received a fake taco. Day 16 is a strong argument for why this taco was fake. I was feeling deja vu while beating day 17 because it was a 90% copy of day 1. However, it was slightly tougher because of the blue skull zombie and the man with a newspaper. Day 18 was an easy one, so we are moving to the next one. Day 20 introduced us to the dangerous balloon zombie, and I'm not really glad to see a flying balloon. These zombies have to be destroyed before they reach the kernel pulse, because if they do so, the chances of saving the lawnmowers drop to 0. Fortunately, only one lawnmower was lost because of it, so we can sleep well. Here comes the All-Star Zombies, so we have to be ready to play football. Day 21 was all about countering the new enemy, and what I discovered is that the best possible way to defeat it is to blow it up with a plant food ability of a coconut cannon. He has no chance to stand against a powerful coconut shot, so this game can be played by both of us. Day 23 was once again about the beach zombies, so I suggest moving on to the next level. Day 24 contained a lot of football zombies, but fortunately I've got a cherry bomb to answer them. Day 26 became a total mess, and that's all because of the hair metal Garg who was cracking my plans like macadamia nuts. However, the rest of my lanes were strong enough to stop it, especially because I planted a lot of snapdragons. It was honestly a bad idea to mess around with me. Day 28 was yet another level where we had to gather the needed amount of sun, but this time I didn't need to save any zombies after the final wave because I had gathered the needed amount of sun right in the time. Even though Popka the Parrot stole one of the snapdragons after the final wave, the rest of the zombie flock was successfully stopped, so that only one lone mover was lost. Day 29 was a day with a ton of tombstones, and I don't really like to deal with tombstones and the zombies who create them. Despite being at the brink of the catastrophe at around 80% of the level, I managed to hold on pretty well so that even the Egyptian Garg from the final wave was successfully stopped. For many challenges, Day 30 used to be one of the few impossible levels that we encountered while beating PVZ 2. However, not this time, because I found an ultimate solution for beating this level with only the Pirate's Seas plants. Did you know that the zombies can easily cross the flower lane without actually failing the level? Yeah, there are no secrets or cheat codes behind it, because the only plant you need is a spikeweed or a spike rock. Now the only thing that is left to do is to prevent the Gargs from smashing the spikes, as they are the only real threat to this strategy. Everything was going so well that the level was finished on my first attempt, and I'm so glad that I finally found a way to beat it. Day 31 was the final level of the modern day, and there is nothing to tell you about it, because the number of zombies was extremely low, and so was the quality. Summarizing everything we faced while beating these 10 worlds, I can say that yes, Plants vs Zombies 2 is possible to beat with only the Pirate's Seas plants, and they performed way better than Egyptian one. I actually thought I would once again lose all 3 lives, just like I did in the previous challenge, but I actually lost only 1. The Wild West is the final world of the classical Plants vs Zombies 2, and I've got to tell you a lot about it. Yet, what about the local plants? For many years, plants from the Wild West were considered one of the best in the adventure mode, which made me question how far we can beat Plants vs Zombies 2 using only plants from the Wild West. Today I've got only 3 hearts, which are equal to 3 levels. If I lose more than 3 hearts, the challenge is officially failed. What about the rest of the rules? First, I can only use plants from the Wild West and the tutorial world. Second, no leveling up. Third, no power-ups. Fourth, using pre-planted plants is okay. Fifth, we're skipping the levels that force us to use other plants. Now, without further ado, we are ready to do it. Our journey began with a hot sauce and a delicious taco eaten by Crazy Dave, and that's how we appeared in ancient Egypt. Fortunately, we won't spend much time here since I had no plans for beating it, and the same can be said about the Pirate's Seas. However, we won't come back to these worlds after completing the Wild West, since they are the easiest worlds in PVZ 2, and I have no doubt that they can be beaten with the plants from the Wild West. With that being said, we have finally got a key to the Wild West, and that's where the real challenge is starting. It's day 1 of the Wild West, and it's time to unlock our first plant, which is the split pea. I'm happy to say that even that day is possible according to my rules, because the pea shooter was truly dominating over the cowboys and the coneheads. So, after defeating the final zombie, we have finally unlocked the split pea. Day 2 was fully dedicated to my new body split pea, which is almost the same as a pea shooter, but a bit better. It was also the first day featuring a Dynamite Man, and now we can finally justify the price of the split pea, whose dark side leaves no chance for the old man to defeat me from behind. Day 3 is the first day containing annoying piano music. And fortunately, I've got a plant food for such a case, so the annoying music will stop playing in a matter of seconds. Wait, what is that? Is it dangerous? Okay, Crazy Dave, I've got it. I don't allow you to use the so-called boombox. You are not a creeper to do that. Did you know that the Toaster Zombie is a big fan of a chili bean? Day 5 was the first serious day of the Wild West, and I've got a new body on my team to stop the zombie horde. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the chili bean, a big lover of stinky farts. I was 10 years old when I first played with the chili bean, and it was hilarious to see the zombies dying after eating a goofy bean. Day 6 was the first last stand level of the Wild West, and I was worried a bit about beating it. Even with a bunch of potato mines, it was still scary to encounter a horde of poncho zombies combined with pianos. Everything wasn't going that great even by the middle of the level, because I had no real power to defeat the metal guys, not to mention the pianos. Of course, by the final wave, my lawn was already collapsing and I was preparing to play it again. So because the music was playing, the zombies could change the lanes, and that's what happened with me right in the end. However, the luck was on my side and the final zombie had blown up right in the time. Oh, and here is the pea pot. Day 7 was decided to be beaten with the pea pot, which is still my favorite pea shooter in Plants vs Zombies 2. When I began playing this game, the pea pot was the most powerful pea shooter because it was the only one who shoot more than 2 peas at a time. Even though we've got a lot of powerful pea shooters in 2026, I still consider the pea pot the best of all free-to-use pea shooters in PVZ 2. Day 8 was a big battle day, which we had to survive with all the plants we got from a conveyor belt. All I can say about it is that this battle was interesting and we had enough plants, especially pea pods, to counter a zombie attack. Not even a cowboy gargantuar could pose a threat to us, so I'd like to call it a total victory over the zombies of the Wild West. It's day 9 and we had to survive the zombie attack with the given plants. Of course, I couldn't miss an opportunity to play with an expansive wintermelon, so he became the main character of the level. It was so enjoyable to make the zombies move slower because I don't really like to see them moving fast. Yeah, I truly love playing with the wintermelon. As a result of a great, stunning battle, we received the lightning reed, which is going to become extremely useful in the upcoming days. On day 10, I fried so many chickens that even KFC couldn't compare to me. I guess we have produced enough buckets of fried chickens to feed all of you watching that video. Put a like on this video if you like fried chicken, because I really do. I couldn't spend over 500 cents on day 11, so I combined logic with creativity, which led me to the solution you see on the screen. Here is the pea pod with 4 heads. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough cents to place the 5th one, but even that alone did all the scenes so well that none of the zombies could even think about reaching the lawnmowers. It's day 13 and this is the first day that I used my new combination of the lightning reed and the melon pult. It is especially useful when we have to deal with tough zombies like toasters or the newly introduced bull zombie. In addition, the chili bean became extremely useful when dealing with bulls, as feeding a big guy with a portion of chili is the easiest way to handle it. Nothing new has happened on day 14, except that I fried a lot of chickens while beating it. Day 15 had a restriction of losing no more than 2 plants while beating the level. However, I didn't lose a single one, so we are moving to the next one. Look, it's a Johnny placed on the minecart. Don't worry buddy, those zombies won't eat you, because I won't let them do that. Day 16 is by far one of the hardest levels of the Wild West, and that's all because I decided to complete it with a pea pod. You see, there were lots of different zombies, some of which could break me down from behind, so instead I had to beat them with a melon pult and a lightning reed. However, it is what it is, so I decided to do my best in this situation. Fortunately for me, I was shooting enough peas to stop all kinds of zombies, and the chili bean was helping me a lot to stop the zombies from behind. 11 Burger King flopas out of 10. Oh no, the flower lane. Again. You know, I like flowers, but not that kind of flowers. Day 17 is the best level to be played with a pea pot, because the little body can make sure that our defense stays strong and none of the zombies can come close to my flowers. In addition, the final wave is a strong argument for why you should play this level with a famous pea pot. Day 10 is the second last stand level of the Wild West, and it's time to prepare the defense. This time I decided to combine Johnny the Walnut with the Lightning Reed, which was obviously a good choice, though its placement wasn't ideal. As a result, I had to start everything from scratch, but now with an understanding of the level. So because of the correct placement of the plants, the second attempt succeeded, and I completed the level when I was one step away from failing it. Oh, so here is my buddy Tall Nut. He is really tall. On day 19, I used the Tall Nut for the first time in this challenge, and I can say that the big body is really useful, but its prime time will be a bit later. Day 21 is all about having fun, so let's forget about the existence of the flower lane. Imagine how easy this level is if I completed it with only the split pea and the lightning reed. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Day 22 was beaten using my favorite winter melon, but I also had to plant a lot of sunflowers to cover the sun deficit. In addition, those sunflowers served as an effective shield against the chickens, since the angry birds were actually eating everything they saw. Yet, the level was completed, so I've got nothing to complain about. Day 23 was one of the easiest days of the Wild West, and it was also the first level when I planted a lane of tall nuts. They were exceptionally useful against the bucketheads, so I don't miss a chance to place a really tall nut. On day 24, we had to protect 3 Johnnies at a time, and the best way to do that is to place a few lanes of some of the best plants of the Wild West. At one point, the front Johnny was really close to being eaten, but fortunately I had a plant food for such a case. What about the final wave? Well, not even a lane of bulls could scare me, so all of them were defeated in a matter of seconds, after which we received the final and the main plant of the Wild West, which is the winter melon. Day 25 was one of the easiest battles with the Dr. Zombas, and it's all because of the plants from the Wild West are one of the best. So the Dr. Zombas was defeated in less than 4 minutes, and we finally got a key to the next world, which is full of the frozen prehistoric zombies. Welcome to the frozen wastes of prehistory. Today the cold wind will become extremely dangerous, so not even the winter melon can survive the low temperatures. Yeah, it looks like we've got ourselves in a trap. Yet, it is only day 1, so let us have some fun. I decided to pick some of my favorite plants on that level to check their efficiency in the new realities, and I can say that all of them did pretty well. It's day 2 and I got a present on the face of a frozen repeaters. The reason I love the lightning reed so much is that it is able to easily break the ice on the surrounding plants, which is one of the key factors for picking the plants in the frostbite caves. You've got to create something new and unique if you want to beat that world without using the fire plants. Day 4 was remarkable because it was probably the first and the last time we used the pea pod in this world. Unfortunately, it isn't the best plant for defeating the enemies from prehistory, so we should focus more on some other plants. Yet, it was so enjoyable to plant a lane full of 5-head pea pods. I actually thought that day 6 would be extremely hard, since I remember how hard it was to beat that level with only Egyptian plants. Yet, the winter melon's plant food ability has saved us from a total collapse, so we were capable of holding the defense till the end of the level. Even though most of day 7 was beaten with the help of the lightning reed, the remaining part of our success also belongs to the pre-planted split pea, which played a significant role in defeating the zombies from behind. That's why the locals had no chance to stop us. Day 9 was the first day featuring a dodo bird, and what I find interesting to tell you is that the melon pult is especially effective against the giant birds. Just don't tell the dodo rider that stealing a bird from a tropical island wouldn't help it to get closer to my brain, especially with a reliable body like the melon pult. I know that you all were waiting for a famous day 11, and so was I. I won't lie if I say that I was skeptical about beating that day, since I don't have a melee plants like the bok choy or the snapdragon, which I had in my previous challenge. Yet, that doesn't mean that I gave up, because I knew that only the heavy artillery could make this level possible to beat. That's why my choice fell on the melon pult, and I didn't actually expect that everything would go like that. By the third wave, I thought that the level was lost and I had to replay it, but the chili beans saved me from a total collapse, and I did it twice. By the fourth wave I was standing so strong that the zombies had no chance to reach the lawnmowers, and that was the turning point of the whole challenge. Before day 11 I thought I would fail this challenge around the Neon Mixtape Tour or the Jurassic Marsh, but now I'm sure that everything is possible and I'll do my best to beat this challenge without losing a single life. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the Frostbite Caves, so let's prepare a decent defense. Oh well, everything went wrong on my first attempt, so I guess I need to try again. This time I decided to focus all the attention on the potato mines and the lightning reed, just like we did in the Wild West. A bit later I placed a few melon pools, which were essential for breaking the ice on the surrounding plants. Even though I didn't complete this level without losing the lawnmowers, I still did it pretty well, so I can be proud of myself. Day 13 was the first day featuring the Slothgarg. So what do I think about it? Well, the Slothgarg is a tough enemy with lots of imps, but when you have a lane of melons with a lane of the lightning reeds, nothing much can surprise you. On day 14 we had to survive the zombie attack using the given plants, and I can confirm that this was the prime time for the split pea, because for the first time in many days its backward shooting piece became extremely useful. Not even a giant horde of the zombies could stop the green body from defeating the ice and the enemies, which tell us a lot about its efficiency in the Frostbite Caves. 11 green peas out of 10. Usually day 15 is a pretty tough day because defending the pepper pool isn't the easiest task. However, when you've got a lot of melon pools, not even the surrounding ice is a big obstacle to achieving your goals. For at least a few times I was one step away from failing the level by giving the zombies an opportunity to eat the pepper pool, but still we didn't give up because the tall guy was standing strong. On day 17 we finally had an opportunity to play with the fume shroom, which isn't so common in the Frostbite Caves. Thanks to the winter melon and its ice shots, the zombies weren't moving so fast, allowing us to take them down before they got to any of my plants. For a major part of day 19, the 90% of my lawn was frozen and I couldn't do much about it. The only thing that saved me from losing the lawnmowers, and maybe even the whole level, is my buddy Chili Bean. So because the right zombie adds the stinky guy, I finally got the plant food, which allowed me to crush the ice on the surrounding plants. Sometimes a single plant food can make the decisive move to beat the level. Except for a cool placement of the melon pools, nothing much can be said about day 20, so I suggest moving on to the next one. Day 22 was the first day featuring the whistles, which are much more dangerous than the chickens. Remember how chickens were defeated in the Wild West? Well, the same can be done with the whistles, because they've got a bit more health than the birds, so we have to be really careful when playing against them. Day 23 may remind you of day 11, but it's nothing close to the legendary level with 4 waves. This time the number of zombies was so low that I couldn't believe that I was playing the second part of the Frostbite Caves, which is supposed to be really hard. Yet, only a few sunflowers had survived until the final wave, and that's all because of the annoying whistles. Day 24 was an absolute mess where my first attempt had totally failed because of the whistles. I tried again and everything was still going pretty badly, but I decided to give this attempt a little chance of success. I was actually surprised that I was holding that well with only a few plants placed on the lawn, most of which were already frozen. By the final wave I had only gathered 1000 cents out of the required 2500. Yet I've already defeated 99% of the zombies, so the final zombie was treated like a gentleman, allowing me to complete such a hard level. On day 26 I planted a lot of lightning reeds, and I didn't regret doing that because that was the only thing that allowed me to survive the cold wind. Sometimes you need only a few sunflowers to make your lawn look professional. On day 27 I had to defend a few rutabagas from either being eaten by zombies or smashed by the Slothgarg. So because I beat this level so many times in my previous challenges, I already knew that there wouldn't be any cold winds on that level, so I was finally free from the question of placing my plants. The best possible thing that I could do in that case was to place a few lanes of melons combined with winter melons, so none of the locals could even think about getting close to the rutabagas. By the final wave I had so many melons placed in the lawn that a few Slothgargs were easily defeated by the melon spam. Day 28 was the second last stand level of the Frostbite Caves, for which I prepared a unique defense. This time I decided to place a lane of melon pools combined with a lane of the lightning reeds. Yet the latter one was placed a bit later, and that's all because of the cold wind, avoidance of which is the key factor for beating the level. Actually, I've started thinking that the Frostbite Caves became my lucky world, because all of the tough levels that we see today are completed on the first attempt, and that's what I call a combination of a huge luck and a big skill. So this was the final level of the Frostbite Caves, which I enjoyed a lot, and we are now moving to the vanished City of Gold. It's day 1 and it is the right time to have fun. As always, I decided to complete the first level of the lost city without placing sunflowers, and guess what? I've gathered so many suns during the level that by the final wave my pea pods were full of the little pea shooters. Day 2 had already introduced us to the parachute rain, which obviously had no impact on my gameplay as I placed all of my plants in the back of the lawn. Well, if you see the winter melon on the second level of a new world, it means that everything is going fine with a 200% chance. It's day 4 and I don't have to worry anymore about the excavator zombie, and that's all because I've got a lightning reed which doesn't care about the golden shovels. Do you know how much I love the Lost City? Well, that's all because of the sun production. It is by far the only world in this challenge where I can easily place a lane of winter melons as the first attacking plant against the zombie horde. I guess I've got into heaven. Wait, parasol zombie? Excuse me honey, do I have to care about you? It's day 7 of the Lost City and I once again have to tell you that the lightning reed is the best possible plant for this world because it attacks both parasol and the excavator, and it does it efficiently. The only difference between day 10 and day 7 is the number of zombies, and everything else stays the same. That's what I call stability. Day 11 introduced us to the annoying flame bugs, but even they couldn't make my mood worse because the combination of the lightning reed and the melon pult is truly unstoppable. On day 12 we had to produce 5000 suns to beat the level, and that was an amazing opportunity to place 2 lanes of winter melons and enjoy these slow zombies. The one thing I forgot to mention is that the tall nut has entered its new prime, because it is the only nut in this challenge that can block the flying zombies, and this mechanic is exceptionally useful in the Lost City and the far future. On day 15 we had to defend a few egg keys from being eaten, and I have to tell you that it was extremely easy. Don't get me wrong, but the first part of the Lost City is much easier than the Wild West, which was the first world of this challenge. I don't know what to expect from the second part, but I hope to see at least a few challenging levels. Day 17 was all about imps with stands who had bad intentions against us. Fortunately, I've got my own answer to that question, and it seems that the zombies don't really like it, because they smell like an overfried chicken. I was finally impressed by the level in the Lost City, and that took me over 18 days to reach that point. By the first wave of day 19, my lawn was already looking like a total mess, and the zombies needed to make only a few additional steps to collapse me. Yet we managed to hold on, so the zombies can forget about organizing a camp on my lawn. On day 20, I decided to organize a defense consisting only of melons, which wasn't that easy today. By the first wave, my lawn was full of zombies, and I had only 3 winter melons to stop them. Fortunately, I had a tall nut, which gave me plenty of time to prepare the rest of the defense. By the final wave, I had no trouble with my defense, and the remaining zombies were defeated in a matter of seconds. Day 23 is by far the hardest day of the Lost City, and I even lost a lawnmower on that level, but let's start from the beginning. Everything was going pretty well until the first wave, when a Portugark came into the lawn and I had nothing to stop him. Even though the big body was defeated, the remaining lanes weren't doing that great, and I didn't have enough suns to stop them all. Then I was doing my best to save some time to plant a few more attacking plants to stop the upcoming zombie hordes, because my lawn wasn't in its best shape. By the final wave there were not so many zombies left in the lawn, and the remnants of the zombie horde were defeated in numerous ways. Even though day 24 had a flower lane, it was nothing close compared to the previous level, but the tall nuts were still needed to protect the sunflowers from being eaten. Day 25 was the most average level of the Lost City, and I've got nothing to tell you about it. Day 26 was pretty much okay, but nothing remarkable had happened while I was beating it, so I suggest moving on to the next one. Day 27 was the first day to encounter a blue skull zombie, which is one of the most dangerous enemies in the Lost City. I can't say that its appearance is as catastrophic as it usually is, but a single shot of the watermelon fed with a plant food can easily stop the old man with a blue skull. I rate it at 11 big floppas out of 10. Even though Day 29 contained all of the toughest enemies of the Lost City, including a Porter Garg, I can't say that this level has impressed me. Yeah, we had to deal with 3 gargantuars at a time, but now what? Does it seem to look scary? I don't think so. Day 30 is the strangest day of the Lost City, and I usually beat it in a few minutes, and this time it was no exception. When all the plants are placed correctly and the plant food is fed at the right time, the chances of zombies breaking the defense drop to around 0. In my previous challenges, I've lost a few lawnmowers while beating that level, but today I lost none of them. With that being said, the Lost City is finished on a high note, and now it's time to punish the futuristic zombies. It's day 1 of the far future, and I decided to combine the split pea with a pea shooter because why not? I had a few pre-planned pea shooters and I couldn't miss such a unique chance to play with them. Unlike the first day, the second day was beaten using the lightning reed's zap power, as it is an efficient way to stop the shield zombies. On day 3 I decided to combine my favorite pea pot with the lightning reed, but unfortunately I didn't have enough time to place all 5 peas inside the pea pots, and that's why life is truly unfair. On day 4 we had to survive the zombie attack with the fallen sun bombs, and I can say that those sun bombs are an efficient way to gather a good amount of sun, so surviving the zombie attack without the sunflowers wasn't a problem at all. In addition, when the tough zombies came into the lawn, I activated the power tiles, so the bucket hats had no chance to come close to the lightning reeds. Day 5 was the first day to include the robo cone hats, and it was the right time to start placing the melons. Even though some of my sunflowers were consumed, the level was successfully completed. On day 6 I had to survive the zombie attack with the given plants, and I decided to include that level in today's challenge because it included my boy Pea Shooter. You shouldn't underestimate the power of a green body because he is still capable of stopping the tough zombies, including the ones with the holographic shields. Day 7 was all about placing the pea pots, which was my number 1 goal for today. While compared to the Frostbite Caves or even the Lost City, the far future is by far the easiest world we've played so far, so let's enjoy that simplicity before we enter the really hard stage. On day 9 we had to survive the zombie attack with the limited number of plants, and I didn't see anything new while beating that level. It may be a copy of one of the first levels, and I'm not actually surprised because of that. On day 10 we had to fight against one of the most annoying enemies of the future, which is the Discotron 3000. The best way to stop it using the lightning reed is to feed it with a plant food, so the cloud with a zap would do the rest of the work for you. Day 11 is the first last stand level of the far future, so it's time to prepare a defense. This time I decided to surround a few watermelons with the lightning reeds, so all the zombies can be potentially chilled, with the lightning reeds doing the main damage to the enemies. I'm glad to say that everything went just as I expected, with all the plants remaining in their original places. Day 12 was the first day featuring a few robo-gargs, but even that didn't become an obstacle for us, simply because my plants are tough enough to stop a massive zombie spam. Take that, metal pile. The number of suns I had on day 13 was so big that I was capable of placing not just 2, but 3 lanes of melon pools. Do I have to say that I was impressed because of that? Or everything is that obvious? On day 14 I couldn't spend more than 1500 suns, so the best thing that I decided to do was to place as many lightning reeds as it was technically possible. Don't worry, I had enough plant foods to deal with tough zombies, so they could do nothing to me. On day 15 we had to protect a few delicious citrons, and what I found interesting to do was to block all the zombies on the very first tile, so my defense became symmetric and not even the flying zombies could get farther onto the lawn. The main reason why I love defending the citron is that the orange body is capable of protecting itself, and that's a big plus for an endangered plant. Day 18 was all about gathering the needed amount of sun in the limited time, which then of course allowed me to place so many winter melons, so I had no worries about defending the lone. Day 19 was once again about surviving the zombie attack using the falling sun bombs. I didn't want to invent any new strategy because the one with the lightning reeds works perfectly against the futuristic zombies, so the main goal for the level was to place as many lightning reeds as I could. Oh, and of course, use the plant food at the right time, so not even the metal garg could stand against the power of electricity. Day 20 was a day when the split pea became really useful, as this was the only plant that could help me defeat the robo-imps that were coming from a bot swarm. Of course, plants like the winter melon and the lightning reed were also used, but they were nothing compared to a combo of split pea and tall nut, which played a key role in making that level possible to be beaten. It's day 21 and I'm once again having fun because the number of plants that I could place in my lone was limited. In addition, I had to gather a lot of suns, so the sunflower became my best friend for the rest of the level. Day 22 was the second last stand level of the far future, so it's time to prepare a defense. This time I decided to use the same strategy as I did on the previous last stand, because nothing else would work in the circumstances of the far future. Even though a few lone movers were lost and I had to dig up some plants to defeat the final zombies, the level was successfully completed, so we have nothing to worry about. Day 23 was one of the easiest days of the far future, where I was frying little body imps like a chicken in the Wild West. Day 24 was the final level with the fallen sun bombs, and as you may see, I didn't betray the tradition, so the level was completed with only the lightning reeds. The main tip or even secret for beating that level is the proper usage of a plant food, because if you do everything right, you can get 4 plant foods at the same time instead of 1. Now, with all the futuristic zombies been defeated, the far future is officially completed, and now it's time to fix the mistakes of the past. It's night 1 and unfortunately there is no place for fun because the suns are no longer falling from the sky. However, that's not a reason to give up, but instead we should adapt to the local circumstances to become a champion of the Dark Ages. As always, the lightning reed is my best weapon to deal with all kinds of zombies, and I think that it's going to be used a lot in this world. Night 2 was pretty much similar to the first one, with the only difference being the appearance of the bucket heads, which are also responsible for collapsing my defense at the end of the level, but that's just the details. On night 3 I finally discovered a good way of dealing with local zombies, so my defense wasn't collapsing anymore. That's what I call an adaptation to the local environment. Night 5 was the first night that included my favorite Jester zombie, but just like I said a couple of minutes ago, the lightning reed is the best weapon against all kinds of zombies, and the clowns are no exception. Yet the number of zombies was already big enough to ignore it, so placing the lane of tall nuts was actually a good choice. Night 6 was the first last stand level of the Dark Ages, and guess what, it was once again beaten by combining the lightning reed with a tall nut, since it is the only working strategy against the famously known Jester zombie. As a result of a great choice, all the zombies were fried like the whistles in the frostbite caves. Night 7 was about the night zombie, who I don't fear at all, because I've got a reliable body in the face of the chili bean, which doesn't care about the metal helmets. Night 9 was the final night of the first part of the Dark Ages, and I can say that the evil potions are really dangerous when you play with a lightning reed, since you are not able to stop the zombies immediately and they can go way farther than you might expect. Nevertheless, everything went better than expected, because the tall nut was capable of holding the zombies at a distance, so they had no chance of getting close to my lone movers. Night 11 is the first level of the second part of the Dark Ages, so it's time to deal with wizards. As I said a few minutes ago, the lightning reed is the best plant for the Dark Ages, as it's capable of stopping all kinds of zombies, and the wizard is no exception. However, if you want to stop them in an unusual way, just place a few winter melons and feed them with a plant food. Believe me, you won't regret doing that. Nothing new was happening on night 12, well, except the fact that I had to protect a little puff shroom from disappearing. With so many plant foods and a few lanes of lightnings, it wasn't that hard to feed the purple body at the right time. Night 15 was the second last stand level of the Dark Ages, so it's time to set a defense. This time I decided to place my classical defense, but with an additional lane of chili beans. Even though most of the level went pretty fine, the situation started to worsen when the wizard zombie came onto the lawn, turning my nuts into sheep. Well, that's not what I expected to see, so we have to try again. There were no tall nuts or chili beans in my second attempt, but instead I played 3 lanes of lightning reeds and a lane of Johnnies. Compared to the previous attempt, the zombies were defeated much faster, which allowed me to survive until the final wave and collapse only after a ton of wizards came into the lawn. Not without the losses, but the level was successfully completed. Night 16 is a legendary level of the Dark Ages, and it was hell of a mess. This isn't a usual level of the Middle Ages, since you have to deal with a ton of zombies with a limited number of plants and a limited number of opportunities to stop them. In my previous challenges, this level was completed with the Bang Chai or the Snapdragon, but today I've got none of them, and that's a big problem, to say the least. All the mess began to happen right on the first wave, when the regular zombies started to transform into the knights. The lightning reeds were obviously useless in today's case, so they were substituted with a split P, whose goal was to defeat the zombies from both sides. Even though my lawn had totally collapsed even before the final wave, it was more than enough to clear a major part of zombies that appeared on the level, so by the final wave, only a few of them were remaining on the lawn. As you may understood, this level isn't about the wise gameplay, but it's more about the survival games combined with the elements of micromanagement. However, beating it on the first attempt makes me feel so proud of myself. On night 17 the zombies were boosted with evil potions, which isn't that good. However, we also had a lot of sun graves, breaking which allowed me to prepare a serious defense capable of withstanding numerous zombie attacks, including a punch from the medieval Garg. Here comes the final night of the Dark Ages, so it's time to have fun with my fellow magnet shroom. Unlike many plants that are placed on the banana seals, the magnet body is one of the best because it leaves no chance for zombies with metal objects to come close to the other plants. It was so satisfying to destroy the zombies in large numbers, knowing they could do nothing to my defense or the endangered bodies. So with defeating a few final Gargs, the Middle Ages are officially completed, and now it's time to travel a bit closer to the taco. Welcome to the 1980s with its rhythm changes and new zombies. Compared to the worlds we saw previously, day 1 of the Neon Mixtape Tour wasn't an easy one. Even though this level didn't contain any special zombies, the Peapods were already struggling against the Bucketheads, which made me a bit worried about the upcoming levels. Day 2 was the first day including a punk zombie, and I'm happy to say that I've got nothing to stop the metal guy when he's feeling the rhythm. It isn't a big problem on day 2 as there are not so many punk zombies on that level, but what about the next ones? I'm glad to see that the Peapod is still working well against the locals, but I'm really worried about its usability in the future. Well, that's a good reason to try out the Lightning Reed and the new realities. So, what can I say about the Chicken Fryer? Well, I've got some mixed feelings about its usability. On the one hand, day 4 was completed exclusively with that plant, but on the other hand, my lawn had completely collapsed by the final wave, and I'm not really sure about its efficiency against the tough bodies. Day 5 gave me a pure understanding that the Neon Mixtape Tour isn't going to be an easy stage, but let's start from the beginning. This level is all about protecting the fat beat, which may sound easy, but not when you play with the plants from the Wild West. Even the Peapod with multiple heads was struggling against the fast zombies, so it was a pure miracle that this level was beaten on the first attempt. Well, I knew that the Neon Mixtape Tour would be hard, but I couldn't expect it to be that hard. We've seen a lot of tough levels in this challenge, but none of them could compare with day 7 of the Neon Mixtape Tour. So right after entering the level, you have to defeat a few punk zombies, which are moving at the speed of a rocket. In addition, the Chili Bean can only stop the regular zombies, so do not even try to beat it without the potato mine. By the first wave, you see a lot of glitter zombies, which finally turn everything into a total mess. I also need to mention that I accidentally clicked on the Zap power-up, so you have no questions about the number of coins that I have. However, something inside me told that this level is possible, so I didn't give up in my numerous attempts to beat it. The main tip for beating that level is to pick only the right plants, which you can see now on the screen. After spending over 30 minutes on that level, it was finally completed and I was so satisfied that I didn't give up, because I didn't want to lose my first life so early. Don't worry, day 8 is horribly hard as well, but now I've got a working strategy to stop the local zombies, so I have no worries about beating it. Even though the zombies from the final wave have totally annihilated my defense, only one lone mover was lost, so everything isn't that bad as I expected it to be. Day 9 was included in this challenge because of my boy P-Shooter, who played a key role in defending the sunflowers. Now you know that this level is possible with only the P-Shooter. It looks like I've got only one way to defeat the local zombies, and that is the lightning reed. Day 12 was the first day to include a hair metal garg, which was smashing my plants while listening to an epic metal theme. However, even that didn't help him to stop me, so the level was completed without losing the lone movers. Those of you who have seen the previous challenges have been waiting for Day 13, which is by far the hardest last stand level in all of Plants vs Zombies 2. However, it isn't that hard when you've gotten access to the winter melon, which is a key plant for beating that type of level at the late stage of the game. All you need to do is to turn your lawn into a minefield, so the zombies have no chance to get close to the lone movers. If you do everything right, you will beat this level on the first attempt, and you may even save a few lone movers after surviving the final wave. I actually thought that Day 15 would become a total mess just like Day 7, but fortunately I needed only one failure to succeed. The first attempt failed because I didn't take the potato mine, which plays a significant role in defeating the punk zombies, but the same mistake wasn't repeated twice, so the second attempt went pretty much fine thanks to the winter melon. We've got to the stage where the lightning reed has no usage because the rapper zombie doesn't care about the electricity. However, the winter melon's chill effect is a power that everybody understands. Day 17 was the first day to feature a dancing body, which boosts the zombies like a blue raptor in the Jurassic Marsh. Yet it was only the first level that included them, so they couldn't pose a serious threat. Well, at least we've got a new reason to take notes on the upcoming levels. Nothing new was happening on Day 10, so we are moving on to the next one. The same goes for Day 20, which was all about combining the glitter zombie with the punk zombie. If you feel the lack of hardness by that point, that's only because you didn't hear about Day 21, which is unimaginable without the potato mines. At first I tried to beat this level as fast as possible, but if you want to do everything right, you should do it as slowly as possible. I can explain it with the fact that you need to remember all the zombies and the placements for the potato mines, which are an essential part of that level together with a chili bean. Oh, and do not even try to beat the hair metal garg by yourself, because there is no point in doing that. Instead, you should focus more on placing the lightning reeds so the zombies do not reach the flower lane. After 20 minutes with numerous attempts, this level was successfully completed. The pixel zombies are back in the game, so it's time to stop the arcade machines. Day 23 began with a few pixel zombies appearing on the lawn, which were immediately stopped with the help of the electricity. Because I have no sense for placing the winter melons, the lightning reeds are the only attacking plant you can see on the lawn, and they are actually doing kinda well, solving 98% of the problems. 11 pixel floppas out of 10. Day 24 is the second last stand level of the Neon Mixtape Tour, for which I didn't prepare anything new. Guess why? Because I've already created a working one 11 days ago when we were beating the previous last stand. Even though the number of zombies and their types had seriously changed, the level's outcome has stayed the same, so we are moving on to the next one. Day 25 consisted of only one wave, so beating this level wasn't challenging at all. As always, I prepared the lane of melons with the lightning reeds, so the zombies had no chance to break through the electric melon rain. Look, it's my fellow Sporsum! I haven't seen it in a while, so of course I'm ready to defend a duplicating body. Day 26 was probably the first day when I was glad to see the punk zombie, which pushed my mushrooms at a safe distance. As you already know, I'm a big fan of a Sporsum, so playing with it was a pure satisfaction. Day 28 was the first day we encountered a boombox zombie. What can I say about the new enemy? Well, it didn't affect my gameplay much, since the plants that I play with are real expensive, and it's not a big problem if 1 out of 2 melons has fallen in love with music. Except for that, it was a typical level with lots of pixel zombies, and thank god, only a few punk zombies. Day 29 was pretty much the same as the previous one, but that's not what I want to share with you. I'd like to say that despite all the bugs, the second part of the Neon Mixtape tour is much easier than the first one, and it's really hard to explain that phenomenon. Maybe it's because I've got used to the local hardness, or it's just the way the things work in the modern PVZ 2. Day 30 is the final level of the Neon Mixtape tour, and it's time to witness all of the local zombies. In addition, I couldn't place over 15 plants in my alone, but I never actually felt that restriction because there was no point for me to place more than that number of plants in the alone, and even if I do so, I've got lots of hungry zombies to eat my buddies. Nevertheless, thanks to the stolen effect of the winter melon, the level was successfully completed, and so was the Neon Mixtape tour. Unfortunately, we didn't find Taco in the 1980s, but maybe we can do that in prehistory? Ladies and gentlemen, here is the time period when dinosaurs were still alive, and so were prehistoric zombies. Day 1 is the only day without the dinosaurs, so let's enjoy the first and the only moment without them. Day 2 seems to be the right time to place the P-Pod, because the Blue Raptor is already here, and the Lightning Reed is a bad weapon against the tough enemies. Despite all the bugs and a few eaten sunflowers, the P-Pod did its job pretty well, so I can be proud of my little buddy. On day 4, I was testing the winter melon in the new realities, and here are the results. Dustish fantastisch. I suggest that the winter melon is going to become my main plant for the Jurassic Marsh, but we shouldn't forget about the P-Pod with the melon pulled. Day 5 was not about the P-Pod, but instead it was about the hero whose name is a tall nut. A big buddy has sacrificed himself to defend the other plants, so put a like on this video for a brave nut. The only difference between day 5 and day 6 is the appearance of the famous Stegosaurus. However, it didn't change my gameplay, since I was able to counter it in the same way as the Blue Raptor. The P-Pod was once again dominating the lone on day 8, as it is the most efficient plant against the newly introduced Primal Imps. Well, I couldn't miss a chance to say that it is so satisfying to gather a P-Pod with 5-piece. Day 10 was the first serious obstacle in the Jurassic Marsh, as it was the first level to include a pterodactyl. Unlike the previous dinosaurs, this one is really dangerous, as I have no serious weapon to defeat the zombies from behind. Even though my lone was already collapsing by the second wave, I managed to hold out until the final wave, when I finally defeated all the zombies without losing the lawnmowers. Day 11 had the same obstacles as the previous one, but this time I decided to try out the P-Pod in the new realities. Well, I've got some mixed feelings about it, because on the one hand, it allowed me to easily defeat the simple zombies on the lane, but on the other hand, digging up a full P-Pod isn't the best thing you can do. On day 12 I couldn't lose more than 6 plants, and that wasn't a problem at all with a P-Pod, which was extremely efficient when combined with a tall nut. If your play was on the melons, you've got a big problem with the sun deficit, but if you play with a western pea shooter, you've got no troubles against any kind of zombies you see on the lone. Even though I didn't defeat a primal Garg, I still had enough plants to be lost, allowing the lawnmower to do the rest of the work for me. Day 13 was a day with a cool zombie spam, and I was actually a few steps away from a total collapse, but the zombies had no chance to break me because I was once again playing with a P-Pod. The main reason I love the Wild West is that its plants can be used in many ways, and you never know when each plant may become useful. Day 15 was all about protecting the Primal Johnny, and the best way to do that is to turn these nuts into rocks. I guess now we understand how Patrick discovered his house. The rest of the level has gone pretty fine, and I've got nothing to complain about. Compared to the Neon Mixtape tour, the Jurassic Marsh feels like a vacation after a year of work from 9 to 5. You won't believe me, but day 17 was once again dedicated to P-Pod. I know that some of you were waiting for me to place the melon pulled or the winter melon, but unfortunately it's not possible since the new realities of the Jurassic Marsh leaves no chance for the other plants to be placed. You know, I'm feeling some kind of deja vu because day 18 was beaten in the same way as day 17, and the only difference between them is the appearance of the T-Rex. Well, this isn't the most dangerous dinosaur you can see in the Jurassic Marsh, but you always have to pay attention not to lose the lawnmower because of the fast zombies. If we take a look at the final wave, you can see that we have entered the stage where we've got only one goal in the mind: to survive the total mess of prehistory. Fortunately, I was lucky enough to do that, so we're moving on to the next level. Here comes day 20, and I've got nothing to tell you about it, as we were playing exactly the same as we did a few levels ago. When nothing else is working, the only option you have is to repeat the same scenes over and over. I guess that's how people become crazy. Day 21 was the most unusual level we've faced so far, as it wasn't beaten by the Peapod. Yeah, I know, that sounds unbelievable, but the winter melon was cooking throughout the level, and we even saved a few lawnmowers in such horrible circumstances. Day 22 was the first last stand level of the Jurassic Marsh, so it's time to prepare a defense. This time I didn't do anything new, except for placing a few additional winter melons, but in the rest of the stuff, this level was a full copy of the strategy that I used in the Neon Mixtape Tour. Like I said in the previous world, this is one of the best possible strategies for the last stand level, so I'm going to use it for the rest of the challenge. After a few levels without the hero of prehistory, the Peapod has finally made a comeback on day 23, so you shouldn't worry about its appearance in future levels. The same goes for day 22, which was also about the bucket heads combined with fossil heads and the Jurassic Bully. However, if you thought that we have already passed the hardest levels of the Jurassic Marsh, then you don't really know anything about the Ankylosaurus, which is the most annoying dinosaur of prehistory. As you may see on your screen, day 25 was full of them, and they didn't leave me a single chance to place any plants after the second tile, because they would be immediately pushed out of the lawn. As far as I know, this is the point where the Jurassic Marsh transforms into a total mess, so you have to be really careful when building the defense. By the final wave, I was left with literally nothing, and it's good that I didn't waste any suns before, because I had a chance to finish it on my first attempt and I didn't lose that opportunity. Day 26 was yet another horrible day in the Jurassic Marsh, with a significant sun deficit and no plants in the lawn. I still can't explain to myself how I beat this stage, because I was constantly fighting for my survival and the security of the lawnmowers. Day 27 was yet another last stand level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I managed to finish it in less than 90 seconds. There were no secrets behind beating it, because I had the same amount of suns and the same plants as I had a few levels ago, but this time the Ankylosaurus was actually helping me by boosting the zombies right on the lawnmowers and the potato mines. Day 28 was once again finished with no plants in the lawn, and I have to repeat again that this stage is unimaginable without both the potato mine and the chili bean, which are playing the key role in defeating the zombies. Day 30 is the final level of the Jurassic Marsh, and I can finally relax because there is no Ankylosaurus on that level. Yet it combined all kinds of prehistoric zombies, so the Peapod wouldn't work here because of the large amount of zombies. That's why I decided to beat that level using the Winter Melon, which is the best possible weapon to stall the zombies and finally make them move slower. Even though I didn't defeat all the Gargs by myself, the level was completed, which means that we are now moving to the Big Wave Beach with all 3 hearts in my pocket. Day 1 of a new world looks fine because the water is clear and we are ready to enjoy the summer holidays in Hawaii. As always, we play the first level of the Big Wave Beach without placing any plants in the lily pads, because why not? This time I decided to focus my attention on the melon pools, and that was the right choice because this level was full of bucket heads with cone heads. On day 2 I decided to try out the Winter Melon in the new realities, and I can say that freezing the beach zombies was a fantastic decision since I didn't have much space for placing my plants. Those of you who love the Peapod shouldn't worry much, as I didn't forget about the green body. Day 4 was a day when I finally brought a serious P into the game, so the local zombies could enjoy the power of a 5-head Peapod. Day 6 was the first day we encountered the snorkel zombie, which isn't going to play a big role today, since I've got a lot of plans that can easily defeat the underwater zombie, including the lightning reed. Yet, using the melon pult is a more efficient way to stop it, so that's why the lightning reeds were replaced with the lane of melon pults. Day 7 was the first day without a safe space, so placing the lily pads is essential to beat in the future levels. The rest of the level has gone pretty fine, as my melon lane was doing its best to stop the zombie horde. Even though day 9 contained funny slimes at the back of the lawn, they didn't cause us any trouble, so the level with 4 waves was successfully completed. Day 11 was the first day to include the surfer zombie, which is the first serious enemy we encountered at the big wave beach. I'd like to pay closer attention to the surfer zombie, as it requires a strong defense to stop it in the water. Yet, when it gets out of the ocean, it becomes a serious enemy for my melons, so that even the sunflower is no longer unsafe. However, when it loses the surfboard, an enemy with long hair turns into a regular zombie, which can I easily stop using the melons. Day 12 was the first last stand level of the big wave beach, so let's prepare a defense for it. This time the game didn't give me enough suns to prepare something special, so all I could do was to place a lane of melon pults. As I said a minute ago, the surfer zombie is the main threat to the melons, so defeating it in the water is the #1 goal for us. Unfortunately, my first attempt had failed because I wasn't lucky enough to survive until the final wave, but on my second attempt I managed to hold out until the end, so the remnants of the zombie horde were cleared thanks to the lawnmowers. Well, I'm actually surprised that such a level was beaten on my second attempt. Day 13 had a few restrictions, but none of them had impacted the gameplay, so I have to say again that the level was beaten thanks to the melon pults. Day 15 was all about protecting the lane of potato mines, which I'm not gonna lie, was easy as hell. Imagine beating the level of the big wave beach without the octoguy, the coral gork and the famous fisherman. Well, that's the recipe for the easiest possible level of the big wave beach, and that is the best description for day 15. The second part of the big wave beach presented by day 17 had also begun with an easy level, with the only difficulty being the appearance of Squidwards. Well, in today's challenge, defeating the Octoman in a few seconds isn't the easiest task, since I've got no melee plants, which I used to have in my previous challenges, but instead I've got the plant food ability of the Wintermelon, which isn't the best one for defeating the octopuses. Day 19 was slightly harder than day 17, but everything else has stayed the same. Wait, I didn't tell you that I used melon pults. Yeah, that's the second difference between those 2 days. Day 20 contained a lot of Squidwards because my melon pults weren't doing that great against the Octoman. At one point the situation was so bad that I thought I would lose all of my lawnmowers, but fortunately everything didn't go so badly, so instead of losing 5 lawnmowers, I lost only 1, and all because of the coral gork. Well, compared to the Jurassic Marsh, we're doing pretty fine now. Day 22 was the first day to include my favorite fisherman zombie, which I fear a lot, since I don't have any instant plans to defeat it. However, this was only the first appearance of the plant stealer, so I've got nothing to worry about. Remember, the more melons you plant, the less the chance that your sunflowers is gonna be stolen. Day 23 is one of the easiest days of the big wave beach, and that's all because you have to defend the banana launcher. If you pay attention to the plants that I placed on the lawn, you can see that there were not so many of them, so the banana launcher was doing 80% of the job of defeating the zombies. What a fantastic plants to be defended. Usually, day 25 is one of the hardest levels of the big wave beach, and that's all because of the sun deficit. Typically, I spend about 30 minutes trying to beat it, as I have to find a working strategy and sometimes remember the order in which different zombies appear. Yet today we've got a different situation, because the Wintermelon with the melon pult are the best possible weapons for beating that level, so all I had to do was to beat the level, completing all the restrictions that we've got today. Unfortunately, my first attempt failed because I didn't destroy many zombies at the same time, but the same can be said about my second attempt, which was not only successful but also highly efficient, as I lost only 2 lawnmowers. Day 27 was the most average day of the Big Wave Beach, and I'm glad to say that because I've already gotten tired of the tough levels. I remember how horrible day 28 was 11 years ago and how many hours I spent countlessly trying to beat it without using the power-ups. However, today it is one of the easiest days of the Big Wave Beach, so we are moving on to the next one. Day 29 was the second last stand level of the Big Wave Beach, so let's prepare the defense. This time I had enough sense to combine winter melons with the melon pulse, and I couldn't miss such an opportunity as I love stopping the zombies right after they entered the lawn. What's interesting about this level is that the fisherman became one of my main reasons for this level to be easy, as the game was focusing all the attention on that enemy, which didn't actually affect my game today. What a hilarious turn of things. Day 30 is the final level of the Big Wave Beach, and similar to the Pirate Seas, it became the first and the only impossible level of this world, but let's start from the beginning. I spent around 20 minutes getting the best possible circumstances to understand if this level is possible with only the western plants, and when I finally got to the third wave, I was ready to lose it, because I not only had a big sun deficit, but also had only a few plants in my lawn. When I finally completed this level with an infinite, I discovered how bad the final wave is, which only confirmed my thoughts about this level. Well, I'm actually surprised that I'm losing my first life so lately, because I thought I would do that in the Neon mixtape tour. Nevertheless, I've got 2 more lives in my pocket, and with that being said, we're finally moving on to the modern day. Welcome to the place where everything had started. Today we've got a unique chance to try out the Peapod in the new realities, and of course we won't miss such an opportunity. Even though it's only day 1, I almost lost a lone mower because of the mega football zombie. Well, I guess that's how the good journey is starting. Day 2 contained a lot of camels, and I had no fun defeating them because there were a few time portals from the Big Wave Beach, and my favorite surfer zombie was doing his best to break the defense, which I centered around the Peapod. Don't worry, I'm not blaming the green body, I only blame the surfboard. However, despite all the buts, the level was successfully completed. Fun fact about day 4, this was the first day of the modern day on which I didn't lose a single lawnmower, and I even defeated a classical Garg. 11 big floppas out of 10. Day 5 was the first day to feature the newspaper zombie, and I had a lot of trouble defeating the angry man. Well, that's probably because I didn't take a potato mine, which is a big mistake to say the least. On day 6 we had to gather 4000 suns to beat the level. Sounds simple, right? Yeah, that's how it works. This is the first time I've beaten day 6 so easily, because in my previous challenges with plants from the Pirate Seas and ancient Egypt, I struggled a lot against the local zombies since I had no tough plants to defeat them. However, the same can be said about the melons, so the melon rain is the ultimate answer to all of your questions. Day 7 got me back into the times of the Big Wave Beach, when my lawn was full of octopuses and I didn't know what to do with them. This time not even the Peapod could stop the mess from the 1960s, because the number of zombies was so big that it's hard to describe everything that was happening here. Yet, thanks to my favorite lawnmowers, the level was successfully completed, leaving no chance for Squidwards to capture my lawn. I'm not gonna lie if I say that day 10 was a pretty strange day, because it combined the zombies from different epochs that shouldn't be combined. For example, here we can see the zombies from prehistory, the Ice Age and the far future all at once. However, even such a combination was nothing for my Peapods, which were doing their best to stop a weird zombie mix. What a strange level it is. Day 11 was just a regular day of the modern days, so I suggest moving on to the next one. Unlike all the previous levels, day 12 was really hard, and I spent about 20 minutes trying to beat it. At first, I tried to complete it by combining the Peapod with the melon pult, but that was honestly a bad decision, because I didn't even hold out until the final wave. The second attempt wasn't as bad as the first one, but I still made a lot of mistakes, especially because I decided to use the Peapod. Yet, on the third attempt, I finally decided to use the lightning reed, which was my last hope of completing it. Despite all the bots and the badly placed plants, the level was completed, but I was actually only a few steps away from failing it. Well, I guess the luck was on my side. Day 15 is the final level of the first part of the modern day, so let's defend those prehistoric Johnnies. Similar to day 12, I decided to use the lightning reed as this is by far the most efficient plant against the weak zombies, and this level was all about them. Of course, I didn't forget to feed one of the Johnnies with a plant food, because otherwise the zombies would consume it. Even though some scenes didn't go as well as I planned them to be, the level was completed and so was the first part of the modern day. Day 17 was the first day to feature the balloon zombie, but today I've got no reason to fear it because A. I've got a melon pulled, and B. Here is the tall nut. As for me, it sounds like an ultimate answer to all of your questions. Day 18 was easier than day 17, so I've got nothing to share with you. On day 20, the sentinels were used to generate a ton of sun, which led me to place 2 lanes of melons. That's what I call a true success. Day 21 was all about the non-stop attack of the all-star zombies, so I had to sacrifice a lot of plants to stop the football machine. Even though most of the plants were lost even before the final wave, we still managed to hold out thanks to the winter melon, which also played a key role in stopping the remnants of the zombie horde. Day 23 was once again dedicated to my favorite zombies from the Big Wave Beach, which were annoying me a lot throughout the level. Combined with the newspaper zombie, they create an unstoppable combo so that only a few lanes managed to survive a massive zombie attack after the final wave. On day 24, I finally got control over the lawn, so the football zombie can forget about smashing my plants. As always, the level was completed with only melons, since the rest of the plants from the Wild West are not capable of stopping the zombie horde at that stage. Day 26 was even more annoying than all of the previous levels, and that's all because of the Discotron 3000 made a comeback. If only that were a problem, I wouldn't tell you much about it, but the second enemy that made a comeback was the hair metal Gork, which was ready to clear the lawn with a sound wave. Despite losing all of the lawn movers, I was really happy to forget about this level and its existence. Everything went fine on day 28, with all the sheep turning back into plants. It took me 2 attempts to beat day 29 because I couldn't stop the flying balloon from reaching my brain on the first attempt. Yet the same mistake wasn't repeated twice, so with a big plant casualty, we managed to complete one of the final levels of the modern day. I knew that some of you were waiting for that moment because day 30 is one of the hardest levels in all of Plants vs Zombies 2. In my previous challenge, this level was possible only because of the spike wheat, which didn't let the zombies trample the flowers. However, even with a winter melon and lots of other cool plants from the Wild West, this level is still impossible as the Gork spam after the second wave leaves me no chance to beat this level, as I've got no instant plants to defeat them. Well, I was ready to lose my second heart at that stage, so I'm not really worried about that because I've got one more in my pocket. Day 31 is the final level of the modern day, and it is nothing compared to the levels we saw previously, so it's a fantastic opportunity to speak about the challenge. Summarizing everything we faced while beating these 9 worlds, I can say that yes, Plants vs Zombies 2 is possible to beat with only the plants from the Wild West, and they performed better than the Egyptian ones, but worse than the plants from the Pirate Seas.